Great lineup today. We've got Larry Johnson, former CIA. We've got Trita Parsi. We've got Professor Robert Pape, who is going viral at the moment in terms of his thesis about the escalation trap. And then we've got former British Ambassador Ian Proud. Lots to speak about. A huge amount of interaction and engagement on the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to be breaking that down with all of the guests. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Lots to speak about. Let's get right into it. Larry, how are you?
You know, I thought you saved the best for last. You got me leading off. No, actually, that's a good one. I love Ian. Ian's a good man.
Yeah, he's great. He's great. How are you doing, though?
Good. Yeah, and I admire the work of Trita and Professor Pape.
Well, you're the top of the, for me, you're the top of the mountain of all of them, and this is why we got you first, Larry.
Yeah, there you go. An aspiring politician you are.
Well, I don't know about that, but I appreciate you as always, Larry. Larry, we need to get into it. There's a lot going on in the Strait of Hormuz. A lot of it's hard to get down to what's really going on. There's a lot of claims being made by Iran. There's a lot of claims being made by the US. If you can give an overview of what's happening, then I've got a few questions about, for example, the US vessels being hit today. There was some Iranian tankers that were hit, so we'll get into that. But what's your overarching thoughts on what's happening over the last 2 days? We thought the UAE was attacking, then we found out the United States was attacking. What's your kind of overview of what's happening?
Yeah, no, the United States is going to renew the war with Iran. That's for certain. There's no negotiated settlement. There's just it's an impossibility. I wrote a piece last night at sonar21.com just saying that it's a gulf too wide to bridge. The United States, it's not just Trump. Listen to what the Marco Rubio says, Pete Hegseth says, that John Ratcliffe says, the pundits that populate Fox News, CNN, MSNB Now, or MS Now. You rarely hear nobody who will defend Iran is allowed on air, number one. Number two, Iran is portrayed as this irredeemable terrorist authoritarian state who are they're hanging homosexuals every other day from a crane with a wire, so conjuring up images of what Adolf Hitler did to the coup plotters that tried to kill him in July of 1944. That Iran is the number one sponsor of terrorism, that it is this great threat to its neighbors. They build this whole narrative, and it's like describing them as a child rapist, and therefore they want you to have a relationship with them. And you're going, what? We can't be around those people. They're terrible. So the United States, just by how it frames Iran as a country, as a people, has set up a narrative that makes it impossible to reach any kind of peace deal. Then on top of that, the delusional bullshit that is rampant in the United States, where they're convinced, we got Iran's on the ropes. Iran, man, they're hanging on by their fingernails. They're going to go down any minute now. They are the economy's crumbling. Soldiers aren't getting paid. The people are unhappy. And the currency. The currency is they might as well be using sand. And ignoring the fact that what's actually going on is Iran's economic relationships with Pakistan, with Iran, with Russia, China have grown, and as a result of that with China, it's also grown with Pakistan. Pakistan has now opened 7, not 6, 7 different transport lines into Iran, plus is allowing Iran to use its deep water port, which I'm told is the largest deep water port in the world. So instead of being isolated, Iran actually is less isolated now than it was a year ago. And whatever efforts are constraining exports out of the Persian Gulf, the reality is It has unfettered access through Turkmenistan, through Pakistan, and through the Caspian Sea up into Russia. So right there, you have the United States convincing itself that, oh, the Iranian economy is so weak, it's not going to survive. And then the leadership, it's divided. And we talked about this last time I was with you.
Yeah.
It's just the opposite, that the Iranian leadership is probably more united than it ever has been in the history of Iran, simply because the men occupying the top leadership positions all fought in the Iraq-Iran war, all are veterans of that war, all fought as part of the IRGC. So it's not like, well, one was with the Artesh, the regular army, and one was with the IRGC. No, they all fought with the IRGC. So there's this notion that there's a split between hardliners and moderates, so-called moderates. It's just it's a invention, a fantasy invented in the West. And then the final point is that Iran is so oppressive, it's so religiously oppressive that people are yearning to breathe free, not ignoring completely the actual changes that have taken place in Iran over the years. So a lot of the suffering that has occurred in Iran was because of Western sanctions, and they're now breaking free of that, and thanks to China and to Russia.
So let's talk about some of those things. I saw a report that basically said that even the train or the rail route from Iran to China has basically become 3 times larger. So Iran's able to get the oil out. Iran's able to get their goods out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that adds to your point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. The U.S. model is predicated on the assumption that Iran is isolated, has nowhere else to turn, and it will crumble from within. Sorry, ain't going to happen. So once you adjust yourself to that, you say, well, what does Iran want? How flexible is Iran? Well, Iran's not really very flexible right now. In fact, they're pretty insistent on, you're going to lift all sanctions, you're going to unfreeze our assets, you're going to stop Israel from killing Palestinians and attacking Hezbollah and Lebanese. Stop that now. And recognize we've got complete control of the Strait of Hormuz along with Oman. And so we're going to be charging people a fee to come in and out of the Gulf. And those that have participated in this war on your side that have damaged our people, they're going to have to pay a fee. And with respect to our enrichment of nuclear material, none of your damn business. We are a sovereign nation. We signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. We abide by the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And you don't have any right to come in and tell us, watch what we do. Not at all. Well, none of that's going to be acceptable to the West. So that's why I say this war will restart. And what will be exposed is the one country that does not have the resources to sustain it will be the United States, not Iran. And people go, what? Are you crazy? Well, number one, just look at if the United States continues to try to put destroyers into the Strait of Hormuz, one of these days, one of them is going to get sunk. But those destroyers, when they're in there, they have about 90 missiles on board the ship that are in what are called vertical launch systems. They're in tubes. So think of it like tubes that are put into the deck of the ship. Once those destroyers fire the missiles out of that tube, they can't reload it on their own. It's not like they take 10 sailors carrying a rocket and then open the hatch and drop it in. No, it's not like that at all. They have to sail out, go back to a friendly port to have them loaded on board with a crane. So that's what I mean. The United States doesn't have the ability to sustain a ship in there in combat because it's going to run out of ammunition and it's going to have to withdraw. But the other point here is the United States does not have unlimited supplies of Tomahawk missiles and JASSMs. And every day that it fires some into Iran is one less day that they could ever fire them at China, which ultimately the United States is saying that China is the big threat, big worry, not little Iran. So that's why I say the United States is going to find itself unable on those fronts to sustain operations. And then there's the whole question of when will the world wake up and realize how damaging the last 70 days have been to the global economy? Because it's one of those things, I'm beginning to sound like I'm obsessed with this, but I am obsessed with it because the numbers are so extraordinary. When you look at that, we were told that the oil coming out of the Persian Gulf was 20%. I just got another source that said, no, it's 32%. So what the world had on February 28th, it was on February 28th. Think of it this way. You got a bathtub, and this bathtub is, you got the faucet on, and water's constantly flowing out into it, and then out of that bathtub there's a drainage spout that takes it out to let's say a bird feeder or a bunch of bird feeders. Well, on February 28th, you turned off the water flow, so there was still water in the tub, and that water in the tub keeps going lower and lower and lower and lower, and that's what has happened since February 28th up until May 1st. That oil that was already out there, it was already in the tub. It created the illusion, we got plenty of oil. But now all of a sudden, it's down, and the tub is empty, or it's close to empty. You can't turn the faucet back on. So even if they turn the faucet back on tomorrow, the flow of oil, it would be 6 to 8 weeks before the oil would actually get to destination, because you got to load it onto a ship. Then that ship has to sail to the destination, and it's traveling at about 12 miles per hour. Covering 240 miles a day, and we got a 6,000 mile trip. It takes a while. So we've lost 1/3 of the world oil. We've lost 20% of LNG, and that's primarily out of Qatar. Qatar is the second largest producer, it's probably the third largest after Russia and the United States. Then you get urea, that's for production of fertilizer. That's 36% of the world's supply. Sulfur, 44% of the global supply of sulfur was coming out of the Persian Gulf. Yeah. And you're saying, so what? Well, that sulfur is used for fertilizer production. It's used for metal ore processing, like copper, nickel, cobalt leaching. It's used for refining petroleum. It's used for cleaning semiconductor wafers. So it's critical economically. And then helium. Who knew that Qatar as well was the second largest producer of helium in the world, 33%. So when you've got significant shortages that range from 20 to 36% to 44%, all of a sudden that's cut off. As that production then grinds to a halt, or the products that you used to expect they'd produce 10, now they're only producing 2. The price is going to go through the roof in some areas, and the economic contraction. People thought they had steady jobs are going to find out they're without a job. So that's why I say this whole cascading effect of the economy on the world. And the world right now, particularly the major financial analysts, they are pretending like this is a carnival. This is no big deal. It's just a temporary disruption. Go on, eat, drink, and be merry. Now, this is like the head waiter on the Titanic after the iceberg is hit, and he's telling everybody, "Hey, sit back down in your chairs. We're going to have dessert here." Yeah.
It's like that meme where everything's on fire and the guy's having his cereal.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what was it called? Police Story. Frank Drebin, the detective. He's standing there in front of the buildings burning. Missiles are going off. There are explosions. There's screaming. There's all sorts of chaos. And he's saying, "Move along. Nothing to see here. Move along."
Yeah, exactly. I remember that. So So coming back to it, Larry, so we know how bad the situation is. Totally agree with you. And things are just getting worse while Trump is enriching himself. That's an important
Yeah,
point to note.
yeah.
But I guess the question here is, looking at it, obviously Trump doesn't seem to care, and he doesn't mind because it's like a wealth transfer. He doesn't mind the poor becoming poorer because what you do is you essentially it's basically one of the biggest wealth transfers probably since COVID, and so this is why he doesn't care, and the blockade probably will continue for a while until they need to get kinetic. But I guess last night or 2 days ago, it did seem like things were getting kinetic. What's your kind of view on what's actually happening on the Strait? Why was Project Freedom? Okay, let's go with each element at a time. So Project Freedom starts. He fails to succeed in it. Apparently, the Saudis and the Kuwaitis then say you're not allowed to use our airspace.
Right.
And the reason they said it is because they're not happy with the United States of America for minimizing the attack on the UAE. They said it doesn't meet the threshold. And so it was a way of pressuring Trump, using leverage. Apparently, Trump got on the phone with MBS. They made some kind of agreement. It seems like that agreement is that he agreed to attack Iran, but then they opened the airspace again. What's your kind of perspective on what happened there?
Yeah, I'm not sure the airbase is open. I mean, that's the story they're putting out. But I was just told by somebody who spoke with a senior member of Pakistan's intelligence service, ISI. We're talking somebody who's in a senior rank. That the Saudis and Qataris are headed towards cutting their ties with the West and solidifying their ties with Russia and China. During Arachi's visit to China this last week, you heard I'm having trouble with the name, the foreign minister of China said he was talking, Wang Yi said they're going to be looking at the security architecture of the Gulf. Well, what makes that important is in the previous week when Arachi was meeting with Putin in St. Petersburg, Putin said the same thing. So that tells me right away Russia and China are cooperating closely in restructuring the security architecture of the region. Now, what does that mean? The previous architecture was based upon U.S. support for the Gulf Arabs and planting of U.S. military bases for the express purpose of attacking Iran. And those Gulf Arabs were asked to buy U.S. debt to help fund all the U.S. war expenditures. They were asked to buy U.S. weapons on the promise that, hey, we got your back. They come after those nasty Iranians come after you. We got you. We'll protect you. So how'd that work out? Well, it turned out that when the shooting actually started, the United States wanted to use their bases, but wasn't doing anything to really help protect them. And it turned out the United States air defense systems were inadequate, to put it bluntly, completely incompetent. It didn't stop the destruction of $2 billion radar arrays that were critical for early warning and other things. So this architecture, this structure has fallen to the ground, and now the pieces need to be picked back up. The two countries out of Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi, Qatar, Arab Emirates, or six, and let's add Oman. The two most critical countries economically in that region are Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And Qatar, in fact, in some aspects, is more important than Saudi Arabia because it produces more of the LNG than Saudi Arabia does. It produces more of the helium than anybody does, other than the United States. And it's right in there with oil and sulfur and urea. So the point of this is Russia and China now are going to, I think, construct a new architecture. Security guarantees will be made to Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And what this what this general in ISI told my friend was that Saudis are going to close down the bases to the United States permanently, and the same with Al Udeid. Now, I'll believe that when I see it, but if Qatar follows through with that, that will be a clear, visible sign that the earth has shaken, that we are into a new era, and that will, with that relationship and alignment, then you're going to see the dramatic easing of tensions between Saudi Arabia, Qatar on the one hand, and Iran on the other.
Well, that'll be the move towards the end of the U.S. empire, right? Because
Yeah,
essentially you're not having much impact in the Middle East other than possibly the UAE.
exactly right. And that I don't think the Trump administration fully appreciates. Maybe they do, but this is one of the movements that's afoot.
Well, we shall see. I know some people theorize that, but I still doubt that happening. I don't think they have the ability to remove the American control from their countries. But let's see what happens on that.
Well, let's point out that the U.S. has already had been removed from Bahrain.
Yeah.
I mean, and several of the bases, at least 8 of the bases, my understanding, are uninhabitable.
Yeah.
So whether or not the
15, I
United
believe,
States chose to be removed, that's a whole other thing. But they've been removed, and they can't go back into those bases right now, and may not ever be able to go back. So that's one as opposed to a de jure leaving. This is a de facto leaving.
Yeah. Great point. Apparently, it's like 15 bases that were hit. This was a report by was
correct.
it the Washington Post, significantly. And as you mentioned, the Fifth Fleet is now in. It's close to you now, Larry. It's in Florida, so it's moved from Bahrain to Florida. But coming back to the UAE were hit. You came on the show. You said there was going to be a response on the 7th. We did see a response on the 7th. It wasn't by the UAE. It was by the United States of America. What happened in terms of that response? US claims that they were trying to bring their vessel through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran attacked. They preemptively start hitting Bandar Abbas, Keshem, and I forgot the third place, but they hit those 3 different, Sirik, I think it was. They hit those 3 different locations. What's your kind of perspective of, and then they said it's part of the reason is because of that, and part of it is because of the UAE. So what was your perspective on what actually happened there?
Yeah, no. In fact, there had been contact and exchange of fire between the U.S. and Iran on the 5th and on the 6th. It just didn't get reported. So I learned that yesterday, that this had been going on for a while. So this is just the prelude to the full reignition of the war on the part with the United States leading the way. But right now it's on hold because Trump doesn't want to create a reason for the summit with China to be canceled, because the Chinese apparently sent some pretty strong signals that if you go back and attack Iran, you're not coming to Beijing. So I think this, we're going to be in, let's call it low boil. So each side is going to be shooting at the other, but not with an intensity. Now, that doesn't mean that things can't get accidentally out of hand, where the United States scores a direct hit on a U.S. destroyer and the destroyer explodes and sailors are killed. That would then escalate things pretty quickly. But otherwise, I think Trump's going to hold off until he returns from China. That's assuming he goes. If he doesn't go, if the trip's canceled, then the United States is going to go back to full engagement with Iran. The ceasefire will be over.
Isn't this in US's interest, though? This, you're talking about this being a kinetic engagement on the 5th, 6th, and 7th, and today as well. Isn't this in the US interest? And what I mean by that is if the war is more like how it was previously, Iran's kind of open to hitting Israel, the bases, the Gulf states, various other things. When it comes to the naval kind of engagement, obviously the US Navy is quite strong, and so Isn't that what the US would want, is some kind of naval engagement as opposed to like a holistic one?
Yeah, how can the Navy engage? Walk me through that.
Well, we're seeing the destroyers shooting at Iranian, at Iranian fast boats. You've got the shooting of the vessels. You're keeping the engagement right within the sea. Obviously, US is killing civilians. We saw 5 civilians get killed today.
Right.
2 naval boats being hit, but the engagement is localized there. Whereas if the engagement wasn't, Iran could have hit those American destroyers and those assets from, for example, from locations within mainland Iran.
Well, no, they can hit them now. The Iran's just choosing not to escalate it beyond that. And remember, every shot that destroyer fires, that's one. It can't replace that. It will have to disengage, sail out of the Gulf to go reload. So that's what I mean. It has very short staying power. You know, during World War II, when the destroyers and battleships would get into an engagement, and they would be firing, and they'd run out of ammunition. They had what were called oilers. So these ships would come. They were just basically resupply ships. They would come alongside, ammunition, food, fuel, whatever the battleship or destroyer needed, it was provided by that order. They don't have that anymore. They got rid of those 25, 30 years ago. So now what they have to do is when they run short, they can't stay in the fight. They have to bail out. So that's number one. So the U.S. doesn't have any staying power. 2, it's keeping most of its naval assets 200 miles offshore. But when and if Iran decides to fully engage them with underwater drones, on-surface drones, mini submarines, aerial drones, and then coastal defense cruise missiles, they have used a few of those, and some short-range ballistic missiles, they're going to take out these ships. And the United States can't do a damn thing about it, other than to pull its ships out. So, yeah, this is just a gross. I hear these people like John Bolton, my former neighbor.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. He lived 3 blocks up the street from where I did in Bethesda.
That wasn't a pleasant sight.
I missed my chance one snowy morning. He was out shoveling snow. If I would have run him over, the world might have been a better place.
We don't condone violence, but,
Yeah.
In a hypothetical dream multiverse scenario, this would have been,
That was just my car slipping in the snow at the wrong time and having an unfortunate accident.
Yeah, I mean, it is slippery.
But no, he thinks you can just sell a battleship in there, start firing off, or a destroyer start firing at the shore, and that'll open the strait. It doesn't work that way. And the fact that he doesn't understand that is part of the problem. Because as long as Iran retains short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles that can hit any ship that comes through the Strait of Hormuz, then no insurance company in the world is going to insure those vessels, which means they're not going to go anywhere. So that's why this, quote, opening the Strait of Hormuz is just a matter of sending some U.S. naval ships through. If that's what these morons believe, well, they're in for a rude awakening, because that ain't going to happen. And so that's where, Iran yesterday sort of preempted, or in response to the notion of freedom, Project Freedom, even though it was canceled temporarily, is that they've now set out a paper and a policy for how they're going to collect fees and who has to fill out what paperwork and where the paperwork is filled out, etc. What I found hilarious is that, some scamsters had already started contacting shipping lines that had ships that wanted to go through the Strait of Hormuz and selling them what they thought was the legitimate paperwork.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw the Indian. They were like, "Sir, don't shoot."
Yeah. So,
yeah, that was hilarious to say the least. But today we saw, it was, I believe, a few hours before we joined on, maybe a few more hours than that. And it was the United States of America hit 2 Iranian vessels, killing 5 civilians. What's your thoughts on that? And what I mean by this is, Iran has control of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has fired at vessels, yet there's been no casualties. What that seems to suggest, and I want your thoughts on this or your information and knowledge on this, what that seems to suggest is when Iran's targeting these vessels, is targeted in specific places. It could be the engine, it could be various other places where there isn't civilian casualties. And yet the US today, once again, target vessels of innocent sailors and 5 are killed. I mean,
Yeah.
what is going on?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the U.S. does what the U.S. always does. It kills civilians. It has no regard for difference between civilian and combatant, unfortunately. So I said that's one of those acts that will add to pressure on Iran to then step up its retaliation. So, I think we're in sort of a gradual escalatory spiral up, and that's where ultimately this is going to be full on fire, as we saw during the first 4 weeks of the war.
I guess one of the piece of like concerns I have in my mind, and I want your thoughts on this genuinely, is what the UAE. The UAE, apparently Iran's been sending missiles. Now these could be false flags. We did see some visuals today of Dubai International Airport, smoke plumes coming from Dubai International Airport. But the attacks from Iran haven't been significant, and the resulting damage to Dubai hasn't been significant as well.
Right.
Now, there's and what is the reason for that? Is it that Iran's not targeting them as hard enough? Is it that Dubai's defense is good? I am aware that the British are there helping defend them. They're defending them themselves. I believe the French may be there as well. I was hearing reports, possibly, I haven't verified this, that the Egyptians are there as well. What is going on in this kind of kinetic perspective? That bit is the bit of what's always been, not completely clarified.
Yeah, no, Iran is being careful not to be the one that breaks the ceasefire. So they're honoring that, and they're doing that in part because of the relationship with China, with Russia, with Pakistan, where they want to be able to take the high road to say, we're not the ones who violated the ceasefire. That was the West. So, they can excuse that, okay, the death of these 5, that was an unfortunate mistake, and maybe that's what the United States told them. But if there are more of these, then I think you're going to see Iran shift from trying to support the ceasefire to saying, okay, the ceasefire is done, we're back at war.
But will Iran respond? Because let's be clear, the day before, I think it was yesterday, Bandar Abbas was hit, Keshem was hit, and Sariq was hit. This is Iran. So, I mean, there needs to be a response, right? You can't be like, oh, we're just hitting your vessels in the Strait.
Well, there will be a response, I'm sure, eventually. I don't know why they didn't respond immediately. I guess it didn't cause significant damage. Apparently, it didn't kill a large number of civilians. I mean, killing 5 is regretful, but that's different from killing 168 schoolgirls. So, but Iran's already demonstrated it's got the ability to respond within minutes. There's something going on diplomatically behind the scenes with Russia and China that involves restructuring the security architecture of the Gulf. And I think to that extent, perhaps Russia and China have asked Iran to exercise more patience in responding. And so that I would not draw the lesson from this that, the United States can hit these targets and Iran's afraid to respond. No, I don't think that's it at all.
Yeah, and from my understanding, those 3 hits on those specific islands, there was 0 casualties. The casualties came today, which was separate to that, which was actually in the Strait of Hormuz, where the United States of America targeted and killed actual civilians on the vessels.
Right.
So that adds to the point that you're saying that there wasn't any casualties and probably was minimal damage, although we're unaware of the actual damage that there was. You believe there's going to be escalation. The meeting in China, that's happening on the 14th, I believe, which is in 6 days. What is going to be the parameters of that meeting? Do you think Xi goes in and talks about de-escalation, or what happens? We know originally Trump's plan for that meeting likely is he was going to say, I defeated Venezuela, I defeated Iran, we control the cards, and it's kind of the meetings basically now totally opposite of that. Complete failure, as you mentioned, the weakening of the empire. What do you think is going to be discussed or said or spoke about in that meeting?
Yeah, I'm still skeptical that the meeting will come off because I think at some point China will decide it's not worth its time. But if it does come off, China's going to make the point: we're done with your sanctions. You're going to stop sanctioning our companies, our people. This ends now, or there's no relationship going forward. You choose. You know, the the face of the world is changed dramatically, economically, in the last 25 years, and I was sort of shocked to discover this, that 25 years ago, there were the top 10 banks in the world. The number one bank was Deutsche Bank in Germany, and then BNP Paris, Paribas in France. Then you had 5 Japanese banks. So between Germany, France, and Japan, they controlled 70% of the top 10 banks, 7 out of 10. The United States, I think, had one, J.P. Morgan Chase. So that was 25 years ago. Today, the top 4 banks are all Chinese, followed by 2 U.S. banks, Bank of America, J.P. Morgan. You only have 1 Japanese bank in that mix now. Germany, no longer in that mix, out. You do have HSBC, which is still based in Britain. Now, but my point in this is, in the past, the United States thought it could exercise economic control because countries like China were dependent on the U.S. dollar, and therefore they had to balance scrape to whatever we told them to do. No longer the case. In fact, China, by virtue of dominating the top 4 positions in the international banking sphere, they are aggregating to themselves power that once was the exclusive purview of the United States. And so, that's going to be on the discussion list. China's going to make it very clear that it's going to continue to build up SIPs, the cross-border interbank payment system, that is replacing SWIFT.
Yeah.
Because it's a digital. It's a SWIFT. SWIFT is ironically named because it's anything but swift or quick. It is actually pretty pedestrianly slow. It's like snail mail. It's emails for banks, but it gets lost in the spam folder, or there's a variety of drawbacks to it. China now is the leader. There's a podcast on a Telegram channel called East Calling, and one of the co-hosts of that is a guy named Ryan out of Austin, Texas. Well, he's in China this weekend. He just posted a video of him taking a autopiloted taxi, air taxi. You get into it, and this thing is basically a big ass drone, rotor with the rotors all around it. Took off, flew him to the destination, landed, gets out. Do we have anything like that in the United States? Hell no. I mean, the Chinese are so far advanced beyond us on so many areas of technology, and yet we keep sitting back saying, "Oh, the United States, we're so great, we're so powerful. Oh, look at us," And man, we've lost our fastball, is what has happened. And so while we're doing that, the rest of the Chinese, China in particular, is running circles around us. So what this conflict that's taking the war right now with Iran, it's changed in character because China and Russia are now fully engaged. There are things going on behind the scenes that we don't understand, but it's not a negotiated settlement because there are too many things the United States still believes and is committed to that will make it impossible for the U.S. to agree to or accept an arrangement with Iran. It's only going to be when the United States is basically defeated, forced to admit it does not have the military power nor the economic power to compel Iran to surrender.
And you're so right about China. China's advancements, largely speaking, remember before the Chinese were infiltrating the United States of America, stealing US secrets and retrofitting them back and basically working out what they were. The major advancements have been because overarchingly, the problem with the US has always been, well, previously they didn't have this problem. It was a free market. You would come up with ideas, we'd compete, and the best idea would prevail. Now you got in the US where corporations run the country. The corporations control the country as opposed to China, where China controls the corporations. And so for that reason, you have monopolization. One company just monopolizes the market in every single industry. You don't see that development. You don't see the technological development, and then you don't see the innovation. And I think that's the major problem. There's been a huge setback in America because now corporations are there just to profiteer and scam people essentially, as opposed to really developing great products. So I'm totally in agreement with what you're saying.
Yeah. No, it's a new world, and we've yet to catch up to it. There's I'm increasingly this nonsense has been spread around by people like Tom Luongo about City of London, Rothschilds, they're controlling the world. They're not in the top 10 of the banks, okay? So all their great control, the world's moved on, and the UK is becoming increasingly irrelevant to world events. It's not. I don't mean to insult your home country here.
No, I agree with you. I'm vehemently against the direction the United Kingdom has gone through. Terrible decision after terrible decision. You saw the decision in terms of Brexit. You saw the decision in terms of COVID. Then the support of the Ukraine-Russia war. Then the support of Israel in the Israel-Gaza war. And then you've seen this current support of Israel and the US in this Iran war, although it's done covertly. It's a complete destruction of our society. The complete separation of the working class who are struggling even more while the rich benefit. So UK has completely just been decimated itself in every single avenue.
Yeah, and when you look at the fact that this decline started, let's say 112 years ago with World War I. Once the United Kingdom inserted itself into World War I and lost a generation of men. And then what followed in World War II was sort of the final coup de grace of breaking up the end of the British colonial empire, at least with India breaking away and Pakistan coming into existence. The world changed, and then with that, the initial humiliation of conspiring with Israel to take the Suez Canal from Egypt, and the United States stopping it. And that was the moment when the UK finally realized we're no longer in the driver's seat. And you think about it, that here you'd gone from, the UK had been one of the leading industrial powers in the world, not just in Europe, in the world. It had been, and now obviously benefiting from its colonial domination of so many key resource-rich countries in Africa, in Asia in particular. But where it once was a center for the cutting edge of scientific discovery. A fellow named Isaac Newton, I guess, he made quite a name for himself.
He was a legend.
All of a sudden, England, the UK is a backwater on scientific, and who's winning the Nobel prizes for science and physics, etc. So we've now watched. And it hasn't been just overnight. It's been just one thing after another, a slow bleeding out. But now the UK's basically bled white. That same process is underway here in the United States.
True.
The United States too it's sapping itself of its strength. It used to be the center for industrial innovation. Now I'd argue that's shifted to China, and China is rapidly becoming the leader in areas that the United States once dominated. And in fact, it used to be a thing for the Chinese elite wanted to send their kids to school in the United States. Now what's happening is kids that have been educated in the United States, when they come back to China, they're actually having trouble getting a job. Preference is going to kids that went to the top universities in China. And when you look at the world the top ranked like 20 engineering schools. China's got like 8 of the top 10. In the United States, MIT is the highest, and it shows up as number 13. So, that's why I said this world is changing, and the ability of the United States to dominate it, to control it, to dictate what others do, it's slipping away. And so that'll be one of the issues that'll be, at least they're behind the discussions between Trump and Xi.
No doubt, no doubt. And just to add to what you're saying, basically after World War II, you saw the significant loss of life. You saw the destruction of Britain. And so that's why, like, basically my grandparents, there's the reason they came to the United Kingdom in the 60s was because, basically the early 60s was because of this rebuilding of the UK, which after the devastation, the steel factories, the industry, the manufacturing, all of these things were basically completely not workable. But now what you've seen over time is these entire industry is shut down. And what is the UK known for? It's basically insurance. That's basically what UK imports is, just basically insurance. So we've completely just destroyed our entire manufacturing base. And we've seen the same with the US recently. It happened later, but we've seen the same thing with the US, and this is why these other countries are benefiting significantly. And so, with Trump saying that he wants to improve the manufacturing industry, he can say that, but then he's not doing real tangible things in order to do so. I was actually supportive of the tariffs if they were done properly, if they were done to build actual manufacturing in the United States of America, but they never were. That was always a facade. Really, what happened with the tariffs was, again, destroying small businesses, destroying medium-sized businesses, then beaten up by the corporations, and again you have a monopolization once again. So every single decision that's made is always for the larger corporations when it comes to Donald Trump. But coming back to the war with Iran, specifically on the Strait of Hormuz, you mentioned that things could possibly escalate, although all the sides don't want it. Why is that engagement even happening? Like, why is it that the US is even engaging with Iranian vessels? We saw up until this week, vessels were coming out of the Strait very easily. I did a Substack where I believe 250 vessels had easily gone out. Iran had made $5 billion. Why this kind of extra after Project Freedom? He abandoned it, but then there's been this engagement. What's the reason for it? What's the logic behind it?
Well, it is. I was going to look up the live tanker map, and you got to sort. You got to go to the original sources to sort through the propaganda, what is being put out as the claim that there's all this attacks, when in fact it doesn't look to be quite as bad as it's being portrayed. So let's see. It shows right now 171 ships are locked away up into the north part. 13 ships right now in the Strait of Hormuz, where it's going through the channel that Iran controls. And then you got a bunch down south. So, this is a case where there's a lot of propaganda being put out that to make it appear that, in favor of the United States. Oh yeah, we're beating them, we're smoking them, and Iran is keeping patient and continuing to move ships in and out. And it's interesting that what the U.S. is blowing up are unloaded oil tankers. Okay, and yet everything the United States is doing right now is actually exacerbating the oil shortage in the world. And so it's a matter of time before this whole thing comes crashing down on top of the U.S.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. What's your kind of information on the Brits, the French, possibly the Egyptians defending the UAE and having resources there to basically defend them?
What are they going to do? The Brits are going to send them an aircraft carrier that doesn't work? Who are they going to engage? What highly sophisticated air defense system have the French or Brits developed, or the Egyptians? None. They're going to have to rely upon a system maybe provided by the United States that is short of missiles. This is what I'd call mindless political posturing. It doesn't really add up to anything because they bring Britain and France bring no credible military force to this battle.
And I'm in total agreement with you. I think China and Russia have essentially told Iran to lay off the gas and not basically respond to provocations by the United States of America. At what point can Iran kind of ignore that and start doing something? And the reason I'm saying that is I'm mindful of what's happening in Lebanon. We know Hezbollah is dominating on the ground. There's no doubt about that. But the Israelis are continuing to bomb. They bombed Beirut center just a couple of days ago. They bombed basically other villages. They bombed a Christian village very recently. Now, they were doing that during the war, so I don't... Iran attacking probably wouldn't change that, but at least they'd be defending themselves a little bit. What's your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, look, the one demand that Iran has continued to make as part of if we're going to have a negotiated settlement to the war, here's another demand. The attacks on the Palestinians, the Lebanese, and Hezbollah have got to stop, period. Now, only the United States can do that. And but that means Trump is going to have to buck a lot of very passionate Zionist support. Will he do that? I don't think so. It needs to be done, but I don't see him doing that. So that means, the war will continue. Because they're refusing to entertain any kind of suggestion like that for de-escalation.
Yeah.
It's going to continue.
I'm in agreement with you. I think this is going to continue. I just agree with your analysis completely. This is a slow escalation back to a kinetic war. But the problem here is you can have a kinetic war, and you mentioned this many times when you've come on here, but it's going to end up being more of the same. What do you achieve by doing that? Like, what's the goal?
Yeah, there's where the real cost comes to the United States, because number one, these destroyers, as I mentioned, I think I did. I've done so many podcasts today. If I start repeating myself, just say, "Hey, old man, you've already told that story."
It's good. It's good to repeat. It's good to repeat for the guy.
But when you look at the destroyers, they have vertical launch systems in the decks, and so when they fire a missile out of that, then it's not easily reloaded. They have to pull out and go to another port to get reloaded. So they're not able to sustain fire against Iran. So if Iran could keep them engaged for an entire day, and all of a sudden that destroyer would be out of ammunition, and then what? Okay, so that would be a tacit defeat. So far, Iran hasn't done that, but I'm sitting here looking at the live map, and there's no U.S. military ship anywhere right there in the immediate area of the Strait of Hormuz. So that, they keep claiming that they're there, but they're not.
Okay, so last question before we let you go, Larry.
Yeah.
Pezeskian came out with a statement about a couple of hours ago, an hour before we started, I believe, and he said, he said that the U.S. are reporting that, I think it was the Washington Post, are reporting that Iran has been able to recover 70% of its missile capability. And he said that's false. We've got 125% of our missile capability. Yeah. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, look, Iran, in the aftermath of the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003, recognized that it could no longer have a conventional above-ground defense. And so they set about building these underground cities that are specifically designed to withstand an atomic bomb. Okay? So that even if the United States talks about, well, we launched these bunker busters, and oh, please. The reality is Iran's key ballistic missile production facilities, as well as their storage facilities and launch pads, they're all there underground. So the United States claims that they thought a lot of what the United States destroyed in the early days of this war were blow-up dummies provided courtesy of China. They were decoys. And the United States destroyed decoys but didn't actually destroy anything that curtailed Iranian capabilities.
Larry, thank you so much for joining us. Always appreciate you coming on. Everybody should be following Larry Johnson on his website, Sonar21. In addition to that, your Substack, Sonar21, you said you had a great article came out a couple of days ago. Everyone should be reading that article. And also, we'll get everyone to follow your X as well, Larry. Thank you so much for taking your time out to join us.
Hey, Suleiman, always a pleasure. Behave yourself, young man.
I try my best, Larry. I try my best. Appreciate you as always. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. That was Larry Johnson. Make sure you give him a follow. Make sure you subscribe into his Substack. Great guy, great person. Like this video. Comment on this video. Share this video. Put it in the main section. Comment in the main section. We've got another great guest. He's about to come on. It's Trita Parsi. So don't go away. If anything, promote it. Share it. Let everybody know about it. Like, comment, and share. Subscribe, and have your notifications on. On this channel, go to the bell icon. You click the bell icon. It says all, and then click on all. Make sure all of your notifications are on. We've got a great lineup today. We just had ex-CIA Larry Johnson. We're going to have now on Trita Parsi, a great geopolitical expert from the Quincy Institute. We then have on British diplomat Ian Proud. And then after that, we have the one and only. He is super viral right now, Robert Pape. If you guys could do me a favor on the X space, there's 2 tweets in the nest. The first one is the tweet about on the YouTube, and the second one is the X live stream. If you can all quote tweet both of those, that would be awesome. If you quote tweet it, I will retweet your quote tweets. We want to get as many people in here as possible, especially the live video. If anyone does the live video, I will retweet their live video. Let's try and get as many people in here as possible. We're going to have Trita Parsi coming on. I'm going to quickly, for 2 minutes, give you the news because, we don't want to miss out on the news. We're our breaking news channel. Obviously, the UFO files have come out, and so they've been taking a large amount of the news. But what's interesting is another oil refinery has been hit. And so I am speaking to Richard Medhurst. We are going to try and get him on. But his theory is it was the US who was blowing these places up. But now we have, was this the 3rd or 4th attack in the US? I don't think it's the US. I think it's someone more than the US who wants to cause this crisis. But this one's I hope I'm pronouncing it right, the Chalmers refinery in Louisiana in the United States of America. It's on fire. So another oil refinery at a time when there's an oil crisis is on fire. Atlantic reports that Trump is bored of the Iran war. He's frustrated that it's dragging on so long. And initially, if you remember, Trump was saying he wants unconditional surrender from Iran. But now they are severely and significantly backtracking. Trump has announced a 3-day ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine starting tomorrow. Time to Russia's Victory Day. This includes 1,000 prisoners swapped from each side as well. Requested by Trump allegedly and agreed by Putin and Zelensky. That's that. Let's see what else we've got. As you know, the UK elections, Reform has stormed the elections. Significant victories by Reform in those elections. Trita Parsi joins live. Oh, how do I? Why are the people calling me? This is the problem with the because it's connected to my Mac, you see. So okay, so that's that. Okay, I tweeted that out too early because it hasn't even joined yet. But anyway, everyone can see it. But yeah, let's see. Trita is going to be coming on in a minute or two. That should be really good. But Yeah, there's lots of news. Obviously, as I said, obviously we'll continue to give you the news in between the interviews. We've got Trita coming on right now. That should be really, really good because the guy is very, very knowledgeable. Joins our show. Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, so Trita should be coming on any second now. Obviously, I'll be keeping a watch out for him. We also have yeah, significant. There isn't a lot of news coming out, but yeah, the US still has its 3 destroyers in the this time. They're in the Arabian Sea, so let's see what happens with that. So Trita should be coming on any second now, so that should be really good. Retweet the space, like I said, reshare the space, and then there's the X Live in the nest. Share that, and also the YouTube links in the nest as well. That's 3 things. If you could do that for me, that would be awesome. Lots to speak about. I think it's going to be. I'm looking forward to the Robert Pape one because a lot of people, when they come on the show, they talk about Pape and his view on the escalation trap. And so we're going to get him on. I want to ask him a few questions because I have got a few questions about this theory of escalation trap because I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good positioning, but I think maybe I've got some question marks on it. Maybe I won't about the end of the space. But that being said, he's going to be joining any second now. So great interview it's going to be. Retweet the space, like I said, reshare the YouTube, like I said, and also the X Live, which is there. Okay, brilliant. He is here. Hi, Trita. How are you?
Lemon, how you doing? Sorry I'm late.
No problem. No, you're on time. I appreciate you. I would just want to welcome Trita Parsi onto the show from the Quincy Institute. We've had him a number of times. Great analysis. Trita, I want to get right to it. You proposed the theory a few weeks ago when you came on our show, and you mentioned about you believe that the best course of action would be for Trump to retreat from the situation. This would kind of leave Iran in a kind of complex situation where they don't have sanctions relief. Since then, things have escalated quite a lot. What's your kind of perspective on what's happening now?
Again, great to be with you again, Sulaiman. Let me just clarify. I didn't advocate for that position, and I didn't think it would be the best outcome for the US or for Iran. I said, though, that I think that that would likely end up being the scenario for a variety of reasons in which it would be the least cost to Trump, even though he doesn't get the most benefit. But he kind of went in that direction, and then he kind of screwed himself up by going for the blockade. Because the blockade of the blockade caused oil prices to go up again. So the benefit he got from the ceasefire, he erased with the blockade of the blockade without getting any concessions from the Iranians. In fact, not bringing them to their knees and all of those different things. So he kind of went in the direction that I thought he would, but then he shot himself in the foot a couple of times. And that has kind of made the situation worse and part of the reason why, in some ways, it actually led to a scenario in which the US is in greater need of a diplomatic deal than had he not done the blockade. Now, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
So, but with the situation right now, of course, is that there's been some very significant progress made in the talks. But once again, you have this exchange of fire. You also have the rhetoric coming out of Trump that is highly problematic. I don't know exactly how the exchange of fire started, whether it was the Iranians, whether it was the US, but all of that is complicating matters at a very crucial moment in which there was a likelihood of a breakthrough, not in the sense of getting a deal, but getting to a new plateau, perhaps a memorandum. And from Trump's perspective, this would have been extremely helpful because he's on his way to Beijing next week. And if he doesn't have this situation under control, not resolved it, but under control, he will arrive there in great embarrassment.
Yeah, and he's going Beijing on the 14th, and things are really complex at the moment for him. You mentioned how it's a lot more difficult. How can he get to a deal, though? Because it seems like things are escalating. He's getting pressure from the Gulf states. He's getting pressure from Israel. In addition to that, from his own perspective, you mentioned quite accurately that things have escalated to a point now where it's a lot more difficult for him to A, walk away, and so B, he needs a deal. But the problems with the deal has always been that I think you said they're close. I want to hear what aspects you believe they're close, because from my understanding that they're always so far apart. Like US is just so red lined in what they want that they're never movable in these kind of negotiations.
No, I think you're right. I think that the kind of public negotiation is very unhelpful because it leads to a scenario in which, you position yourself in a way, even if it's a negotiating tactic, then everyone's going to compare the outcome, the final outcome, to the rhetoric you had. And if you're making maximalist demands rhetorically, then it's going to look as if you failed in the negotiations because you're not going to achieve those, even though you may actually have been very happy with the outcome and you never actually believed in your maximalist position. So it's one thing to be maximalist at the table. It's a different thing to also be maximalist in the rhetoric. And I think it's been unhelpful for both sides to do some of these things. But there has been some progress on some of the issues pertaining to the nuclear issue. But none of those things are finalized until everything else is finalized. But it means that flexibility has been shown. And one thing we should not forget, and I think I've said it on your show as well, there is a trump card that Trump has that the other presidents did not. It is not that he's willing to use military force. I think at this point, the threat of military force simply doesn't have the same potency as it did before, given how this war ended up. It's rather that he's actually really willing to lift all sanctions. He is not attached to these sanctions in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot of sanctions worshipping going on in previous negotiations, in which there was a greater fear of lifting some sanctions than there was a fear of failing at the negotiations. So the U.S. side tended to, stick with the sanctions even at the detriment of U.S. interests and the prospects of a deal. Trump doesn't have that. He doesn't like sanctions. Sanctions punish American companies, in his view. He's actually been very consistent about that since the beginning of his campaign back in 2015. So here the Iranians have someone who is actually ideologically opposed to sanctions and is willing to lift a lot of sanctions, which then obviously requires that the Iranians give much more on the nuclear issue than they were willing to give before, because back then far less was on the table from the US side.
But what would that look like? And I guess this is the $1 million question, because like speaking to people from Iran, experts, or even some of the negotiators, they kind of seem to suggest that any scenario where there's basically they're not allowed to enrich at all, whether it's 5 years, 12 years, 20 years, is a no-go for them. The percentage, I always feel like they're very open to, like they're willing to go down to like a decent percentage, which will make Trump happy. But it's that bit, I believe that's the aspect where there's always this kind of barrier. What's your thoughts on this?
I think you're absolutely right. There's certain red lines on the nuclear issue that they will never give up entirely. So zero enrichment permanently will never happen. The fact that the conversations actually have pertain to specific years in which the Iranians wouldn't enrich is a significant give by the Iranians. So in the Geneva negotiations, the de facto outcome of that deal, if it had been agreed upon by the US, is that the Iranians would not have enriched for about 5 to 7 years. But it's not that they would say that there's a moratorium or that they're agreeing not to enrich. The way they would be fixed is that they would only enrich based on needs of 2 identified reactors, the TRR and another reactor that is not even online for another 7 years. They already have fuel for the TRR for another 5 to 7 years, which means that they essentially agreed we would only enrich to produce fuel pads for these 2 reactors. And these 2 reactors already have fuel pads for about 7 years. So it's not that they're giving up. It's not that they're agreeing to a moratorium. It's just saying, well, we don't need to do it right now. Nevertheless, despite how this has been finessed, it is a significant give. They also had agreed in Geneva not to have any stockpile at all, which means that as soon as they enrich, they would immediately turn it into fuel pads. They would never sit on a large number of kilos of enriched uranium, which is the material that you then also can use for nuclear weapons. So those are already significant gifts that they have given, not beyond these like impossible red lines. The question is, what will they get in return? And I think Trump is very open on the sanctions relief, but Trump is also insisting on longer timelines, 12, 15, 20 years. And he also wants to make sure that the existing stockpile of higher enriched uranium at 60%, the whereabouts of which may not be entirely known, it's the stuff that Trump tried to bomb into oblivion, needs to be completely given up and shipped out. And that is right now a major, major stumbling block.
Yeah, yeah. But what about the Lebanon issue? Because I feel like that's another one that would cause. It's very difficult for Trump to make that deal because you've got a third actor, which is Israel involved. How could he get that agreement? Iran is insistent that Lebanon will be included in any deal.
Actually, there's some symmetry there because the U.S. has demands of the Iranians, making sure that Iraqi militias don't do certain things, that Hezbollah doesn't do certain things, that the Houthis don't do certain things. So the proposal that has been on the table, or the idea essentially, has been a complete end to the conflict that also encompasses Israel and also encompasses some of these other groups or organizations. For the Iranians to sign an agreement with the U.S. that does not include Israel has its pluses and its minuses. On the one hand, the minus is that the Israelis may attack again. But the plus is that if there is such an agreement and the Israelis do choose to attack, they will do so without the United States. And the Israelis, frankly, will not go to war with Iran without the United States, at least not under the current circumstances. So if they were to choose to go in that direction without U.S. support, they would have separated themselves from the American side. But the Iranians are nevertheless insisting on including Israel in all of this because of several different reasons. They want to see that the United States actually is willing and has the ability to constrain Israel. It's very crucial because it's not whether the Israelis would just attack Iran. It's that if the Israelis are attacking these other countries in its neighborhood, it's an immediate neighborhood, there is always a risk of a spillover that would lead to a regional war in which not only the Israelis, but the U.S. would get dragged into that war as well. And that would then neutralize the agreement with the United States. So I think the Iranians are going to be very firm on this point. And it doesn't seem, again, that this is a point that Trump has some sort of a ideological opposition to. Other presidents would. They would be like, well, Israel has a right to defend itself, so it needs to be able to take out Hezbollah, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying that Trump is soft on Hezbollah. We're seeing what the U.S. is doing right now and pushing the Lebanese government almost to the brink of a civil war in order to disarm Hezbollah. But at the same time, if Trump gets what he wants on his issues, he has shown in the past a greater willingness than other presidents to put real pressure on Israel. What he hasn't shown is the ability to put that pressure on Israel in a sustained manner. So it's actually kept and it becomes a stable situation.
And that's going to be the $1 million question because I just can't see Trump having the ability to constrain Israel in its entirety in terms of not trying to occupy Lebanon or not bombing Lebanon. Every ceasefire involving Israel has resulted. And this is, again, an important part for Iran because you can agree to a ceasefire, but we saw Gaza is continuing to be bombed almost every single day. Lebanon was bombed throughout 2024 when the
and it would also kind of pull Iran into some of those things because it's going to continue to support Hezbollah if Israel is attacking Hezbollah. But on the first part of it, you said that you don't think Trump can do it or will do it. Will do it, I may agree with you. Perhaps he won't. Can do it? Absolutely. Any American president absolutely can put that pressure on Israel if they choose to do so. It is the superpower in this equation at the end of the day, even though oftentimes they seem to forget that. And we have plenty of examples in which American presidents have done so. Reagan, chewed out Menachem Begin in '82 over Israel's invasion of Lebanon. And on nightly news, Americans saw what Israel was doing. And at one point then said, I'm not going to sell you the F-16s if you don't pull out. Within 20 minutes, Begin called back and said, we're pulling out of Lebanon. So the U.S. absolutely can do so. There's a bit of a approach by some of the pro-Israeli entities in Washington in which they're kind of spreading this narrative as if the U.S. doesn't have that ability, as if, that leverage doesn't exist, even though Israel cannot conduct a war for more than 5 days without active American support. It's because if you believe that it's impossible, you're not even going to consider that as an option. It's a way of disempowering everyone else.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I guess what US, in a logical sense, has the ability. They're the superpower. Israel is in complete reliance of the US. But what we also know is that decision making when it comes to Washington is very much directed and even possibly controlled by Israel. Many of us predicted this war was going to happen because of that reason, because it was never America's interest. They were very close to a deal. The deal you're speaking about now, America was actually going to get a much better deal on February the 27th. And we knew they were going to go to war because of this Israeli direction. But I guess I mean it from that perspective. But totally agree with what you said there. Now, I guess what we're seeing in the Strait now is a huge buildup. We're seeing the UAE being involved. It's 8 waves of attacks on the UAE. The UAE claimed that it was Iran. Iran saying it wasn't them. You then have Saudi and Kuwait, basically a counter reports saying that you're not allowed to use our airspace because we're not happy with your response in terms of Trump about the UAE, because he said it doesn't meet the escalation ladder. And then Trump got on the phone allegedly with Saudi Arabia. They had a discussion and Saudi and Kuwait said you can now use our airspace. It seems to be that he may have conceded, he may have agreed, and possibly the bombing yesterday on Bandar Abbas, Tariq, and Keshem was based on that. Although could have also been because of the Strait, and then he said it's because of that. What's your entire thoughts on the Gulf states kind of possibly pushing this war, UAE pushing this war, Trump desperate for a deal? The reports were that they're actually angry with Trump because they feel like he's too desperate for a deal. What's your thoughts on that kind of perspective?
Look, when something is not going well, you will have a lot of anger in all kinds of directions. And that's what is happening right now. This war is a debacle for the United States. It is a debacle for the states that pushed for it within the GCC. And it's also not been particularly good for, in any way, shape, or form, for the states that very ferociously and heroically pushed against this war. And it has dramatically intensified divisions within the GCC, because many of them do believe that the Emirates was actively pushing for this war. There is plenty of reporting. I have, in my own conversations with the US government, reached the conclusion that they are absolutely right, that MBS himself actively pushed for this war, even though the Saudi foreign ministry may have pushed against it. And now they're in a situation in which they have seen throughout the war, but also specifically in the last couple of days, that the United States does not care about their security. Because in the war, the United States put, at least from their perspective, almost all of its efforts in making sure that Israel was protected. But the same level of protection was not at all provided to the GCC states. Even American bases, in their view, received less protection than Israel itself did. Moreover, many of them pushed against this war, but it seemed like the only opinion he seemed to have really cared about was that of Benjamin Netanyahu. So they've seen that Trump does not seem to care that much, does not coordinate with them, and then they end up paying the price for the war without the protection that the United States, or they at least believe the United States would provide them with. And then you have Project Freedom, which apparently lasted 48 or so hours. Within that project, the US escalates without coordinating with the Saudis and others. It wasn't the lack of coordination that was the main problem. The main problem, I think, was that they saw that when the Iranians retaliated and struck the UAE, the US side said this was not a very significant confrontation, and it did not breach the ceasefire. And you did not see, at least at that time, any retaliation by the United States against against Iran. So these states within the GCC then say, whether it actually is because they want more war or it's because they want a deal, their perspective is whatever direction the US goes, they lose. If there is a war, they get hit without getting protection from the US. If there is a deal, Trump will make a deal that is good for him without taking much consideration into their interest. Part of this is endemic. It's endemic in the sense that if you, as a much smaller state, put all of your eggs in the security basket of that other country, you are at the mercy of that other country. And it may be a little bit, not that you're not legitimate in some of your criticism, but it's a little bit, well, you chose that relationship. And that relationship brings with it certain realities. when you didn't balance, when you didn't diversify, and you made yourself vulnerable to that superpower. And that superpower has now, as of late, been remarkably unreliable. What did you expect? In many ways, it's the same experience that Europe itself has. It put all of its eggs in the American security basket. It even deepened its own dependency on the United States after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and then is stunned that it is now so dependent on the United States and treated in the manner that it is. I think the one example that I think is particularly poignant is the German chancellor, who supported this war, who said that Israel is doing Europe's dirty work for it, who said that Iran, that international law, who sat in the White House, in the Oval Office, just days after Trump started the war and nodded along, facilitating America's worst instincts. And now when the war is going terribly, he's actually criticizing the war and criticizing Trump. Legitimate criticisms in many ways. But he's not really in a position to criticize as if he doesn't bear any responsibility. He supported this war. But this is what that type of a dependency does. It turns what used to be a very good ally, an ally that stood up against the Iraq war very heroically, to an ally that has now just become a vassal. And this is how vassal states behave. And this is the fate that they also meet.
Completely agree with you. But just one question on that. How do you square the circle? Because I have heard a number of commentators talk about how the GCC aren't happy, they're moving towards China and various other things. But how do you square the fact that once again they've basically put an order in for almost $7 to $8 billion of more American military industrial complex equipment?
I don't see that as a contradiction, because what I think is going to happen is that they're actually going to spend more money on American weapons, but they're not necessarily going to pay for the rebuilding of these bases, and that the bases will no longer necessarily be the center of that relationship. And on top of that, they will start binding new security agreements with other states, with Turkey, with Pakistan, perhaps with India, perhaps with China, perhaps with other European states. The issue is never that they would or should abandon the United States. It's about diversification and not being entirely dependent on one power, which they by and large have been. So I think you will see that. And as part of making sure that the diversification actually doesn't see as, is not read as hostile towards the United States, they will likely spend more money on US weaponry, but less money on other things from the United States.
That makes sense. Now, we've seen, obviously, we've talked about it now. I'm just reading another report that the IGC just came out and said that they hit a USS destroyer. Obviously, that needs to be verified, but this is the claim directly from them. We are seeing escalation occurring in the Strait of Hormuz. There was quite a bit yesterday, and each day is more than the previous day. So reports now, I had Larry Johnson on just before you, and he said that his sources are telling him there was some engagement on the 5th, then it slightly increased on the 6th. Yesterday, we saw quite a bit of engagement. And today already, since we've woken up, there's been quite a bit of engagement. It does seem like this engagement and the kinetic action in the Strait is increasing. A, what's your thoughts on that? And B, you seem to be more of a believer that there's probably going to be a deal. But does that seem to suggest that there could be escalation and a possible return to kinetic warfare?
Let me just clarify. I'm not saying that the likelihood of a deal is more than 50%. I'm just saying that there had been some progress in the last couple of days, and that may be delayed or jeopardized because of exactly what you pointed out, that we're seeing an escalation. Whether this is the two sides, feeling each other out, testing each other out, testing new red lines, etc., or whether it is something more elaborate than that, or perhaps even something accidental, which is it started off with some accident and then now the two sides are just firing back at each other and it leads to an unintended escalation. It's not entirely clear to me. We have very little information, and most of the information we have oftentimes turns out to be false or misleading or exaggerated. So if you just take a look what the US side said early on in the war about how many times 90% of Iran's own launchers had been destroyed, etc. And now we see that the US intelligence leaks their reports, which shows that they have more than 50 or 70% of their launchers still intact. Iran inflicted far more damage on American bases than ever was acknowledged. So oftentimes in the moments you have to be very, very careful about the information that comes out.
Totally agree with you. But in terms of like the engagement on the Strait of Hormuz, you think that this could escalate? And what I mean by that is obviously logically it can escalate. But based on your understanding of what's happening with the deal, based on your understanding of this very important meeting with China, and from my understanding and many people I spoke to, Iran is kind of, and I just had Larry Johnson who said something similar, that Iran, China and Russia have told Iran to kind of just not escalate too much. They want the meeting, especially before the meeting. How do you foresee all those different aspects to this current dilemma that we see over the next few days?
I mean, the Iranians are going to be careful not to entirely anger Russia and China, but also I don't think they're going to take any diktats from them, nor will they provide any such strong pushes. The Chinese, I think, played a role in convincing the Iranians to show up in Pakistan. The Iranians are very skeptical about ceasefires with the United States. I think that the ceasefire that did come into place disproportionately favored the U.S. until the U.S. shot itself in the foot with the blockade on the blockade. Again, I think there is a very significant likelihood that this can escalate. I'm tending to go in that way, even if there actually also has been some deconflicting, that it nevertheless gets out of control. I think some of the language coming out of Trump is extremely unhelpful. The diktats that he's issuing, the Iranians better do this or something, those kind of threatening language is not the approach that is needed, particularly if you're making diplomatic progress and you need some sophistication to get it over the finishing line. That language is not helpful. In fact, if that language had been helpful, U.S.-Iran relations tensions would have been resolved 47 years ago. There's a reason why they haven't. Many reasons. But one of them is this idea that you can just threaten that country into submission. We've seen now that we've even tried war in order to get them into submission, and that too has failed. So we clearly need to have a different approach. Obama did, and he was successful. It's stunning how little the foreign policy establishment is willing, not that they can't, is willing to learn from the one successful negotiation the United States has had with Iran in the last 47 years.
One other question I got for you, Trita, and I know you need to head off in a few seconds, but the question is this. We saw Iran hit a number of vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, and yet there's been no casualties. So it seems like they've been more precise in the attacking the vessels. But today, just a few hours ago, the United States of America targeted 2 Iranian vessels, and there were 5 people who were killed. What's your thoughts on this kind of American attack on innocent Iranians? And it's not just that. We saw it in Venezuela. We've seen it in Iran. This kind of lack of acknowledgement, there's lack of morality when it comes to targeting innocent civilians.
Yeah, I think this is a pattern that we've seen, that, as you pointed out, in Venezuela as well, that Pete Hegseth has been extremely explicit about. These are not accidental deaths. These are deaths as a result of Pete Hegseth saying that he's not going to conduct war in a woke way any longer. Essentially saying that decades of rules and norms around the use of force that were put in place by the entire international community, in which the US was a very active and important participant, out of learning of how horrible war was in World War II, in which all of humanity wanted to put into place rules and norms to make sure that we would never go down that path again, in which the lives of civilians were just so unprotected in war. He's essentially explicitly saying that he wants to undo all of that. That is in some ways the Israelization of American approach to war, because this is exactly what Israel has been doing for quite some time. And Israel has rejected many, many aspects of international law, not just this, for quite some time, in which it wants to have the benefit as a stronger military power to be able to conduct itself more or less how it wants. We have seen the deliberate, systematic destruction of the norms of use of force and international law by the Israelis live on TV for the last 3 years. And we've seen how most of Europe, not all, but the vast majority of Europe has just completely laid down, pretending to be dead and allowing this to go forward. And then it's been picked up by the Trump administration and that by Pete Hegseth. The world we will live in, if this ends up becoming the norm, if other countries follow suit, is an absolutely terrible world. It's not limited to Iran or to Venezuela.
Totally agree with you, Trita. Trita, I want to just thank you so much for taking your time out to join us.
Thank you.
Appreciate you as always. Where can people find your work? And obviously, we'll put your X link on his T Parsi, but where else can people find you?
I'd love for folks to go to my Substack. I'm starting to invest much more effort into that. So that is at Trita Parsi. They can go to the Quincy Institute's website, which is quincyinst.org, as well as to my Twitter, as you mentioned, T Parsi.
Brilliant. Everyone should be following you, Trita. Thank you so much for
Thank you so much for having it. Appreciate
you
it.
always
Thank
coming
you.
on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Trita Parsi. Guys, make sure you give him a follow. Follow him on X. We're going to put a link out, T Parsi. Also, follow him on, what you call it again, on his Substack. Follow him on Substack. And like this video, comment in this video, share this video, put your notifications on. Go to the notifications. There's a bell. You click the bell on and put all on. Have your notifications on this YouTube channel. And follow my Substack as well. Follow my Substack. We have a very good article coming out tonight. Hopefully, I'm going to finish it. I've already done the research on it. It's about the UAE, exposing them. So watch out for that. But that being said, follow Trita as well on his Substack. Great guy, great person. That being said, guys, we've got another great guest coming on. It is going to be Ian Proud coming on, who is a British diplomat. So that'll be a very good interview. Give me 2 seconds while I just quickly get the links out for it. But yeah, just make sure you are following us on everything. Right. Yeah, this is going to be great. But Trita, very good interview that was. Okay, let's get it on. Hi, Ian. How are you? Can you hear me?
I'm good, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you so much. I just want to welcome Ian Proud to the show. He is an ex-British diplomat, served as a diplomat for almost 2 decades in Moscow. Really appreciate you taking your time out to join us. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Suleiman. How are you?
Great, thank you very much. Thanks for coming on. Now, we've got a number of questions for you, Ian, and we've got you for a very short period of time, so let's quickly get into it. Obviously, you've been a diplomat for a very long time, and part of that is speaking to different parties, negotiating, relaying information. What's your thoughts on how these negotiations are being conducted? It seems quite strange.
Well, the first thing I'd say is I'm glad that the Pakistan government has taken a really kind of important role in trying to bring the two sides together. Hitherto, there'd been little signs from the US administration they wanted to pursue serious diplomacy. What we saw was a series of ultimata provided by the Trump administration. And whenever peace talks did take place, they were followed shortly thereafter by military strikes, which served only one purpose, which was to kill any diplomatic process stone dead. Now, look, diplomacy involves tough discussions between two hugely opposing sides to reach some sort of settlement on areas where they both disagree, right? And that is really difficult. That's actually harder than warfare, where you can just launch missiles and attack ships and attack cities and kill innocent children and that sort of thing. Diplomacy is really, really hard. And I think it's only recently that Trump has shown signs that he's recognized the need to really get into the serious nature of diplomacy. I hope it delivers results soon.
Let's hope so. Now, in terms of the negotiations, we've seen, as you said, there's been negotiations and then there's been strikes. But recently, we've seen 2 elements of the negotiations. One is the negotiations that are happening possibly behind closed doors. And then we have the negotiations that are happening in the public between Trump and the Iranians. What's your kind of thoughts on how this is being conducted and how harmful it will be to try and get to some kind of resolution?
Well, there are 2 aspects to this, I suppose. I mean, in terms of Trump and all of his public statements, his main job here is to convince the American people that he's winning, and when he comes out of this, he has won, even though any observer who looks at the details and the evidence and the massive devastating impact this is having and will have on the global economy would not agree with Trump that actually this amounts to anything other in fact, than a catastrophic failure for the USA and actually for his allies, including Europe and in the United Kingdom. So all the kind of bluster and the Truth Social posts are really aimed at his own domestic audience. in terms of saying, well, look, we're doing a great job and we're winning here and we're cut a deal and it'll be the best deal that you've ever seen. You know, the normal kind of Trump stuff. The important work, the really important work, is the stuff that happens behind closed doors. All really important and tough diplomatic negotiations should take place free from the public gaze. And that's where they have the difficult conversations about the big areas of disagreement on Iran's nuclear program, on Iran's desire, understandably, for some sort of economic relief, some sort of reassurance that it won't be attacked again in the future, some reassurance against its own axis of resistance allies in the region as well, so that they won't be subject to attacks by Israel, even if it isn't, and those sorts of things. So these kind of negotiations have to take place quietly with calm heads behind closed doors, and I'm glad that that appears slowly to be showing signs of happening. And again, I'm grateful to the government of Pakistan for the efforts they've made to try and move this process forward.
Yeah, obviously we want peace, but you've spent quite a lot of time as a diplomat in Moscow. What's the view of the Kremlin on this? And what I mean by that is they're benefiting financially quite a lot. They had the sanctions lifted. They've been able to sell oil, energy. They've become, financially, they've profited quite a lot from this war, in the sense of they've not been involved in it, but they've been a beneficiary. But then on the other hand, I'm hearing reports that Putin has spoken to the Iranians. They're talking about new trade deals. But in addition to that, maybe they are telling Iran to kind of hold off a little bit until the meeting in China happens, and they want some kind of agreement. I don't know. What's your thoughts on what's going on there?
Well, Putin probably has three separate concerns on this. Firstly, I think since Trump has come to power, Putin does want to see some sort of normalization of relations with the US. I think that would be good for Russia. I think that would be good for America if that were to happen. He does have a rapport with Trump. That's important to him, getting past this kind of really toxic US relationship, particularly under the Democrats, under the Obama administration, under the Biden administration. Some sort of big reset there, not just on the economic side, sanctions, but also on the kind of bigger strategic issues around nuclear control and that sort of stuff, resolving the conflict in Ukraine and so on. So that's really important to him. Also, I think actually Putin's main focus really is on the war in Ukraine. I think there's been huge resistance from the European side to bring that to a close. They've actively blocked efforts to kind of find a diplomatic settlement to that conflict. And the Trump relationship is helpful in that regard too. So that's the second. But the third, of course, is that actually Russia has a really kind of good strategic partnership with Iran as well, and also with China. They're part of the group of nations in the developing world under the auspices of the BRICS, grouping that actually looks to establish some sort of alternative in terms of political, multilateral, intergovernmental kind of dialogue that's a counterpoint to kind of Western hegemonic dominance. So that relationship, both in terms of the relationship with Iran, but in terms of the wider relationship into the developing world and how that's emerging as a counterpoint to US hegemony, is also important. So he's got to try and balance all three kind of factors. I mean, his primary concern really will be about, the war in Ukraine, but nevertheless, he's not going to abandon sort of really strong Russia ties with Iran. Just to keep Trump happy on this, he's going to try and balance, the needs of his ally in Iran and what he wants to see out of his relationship with Trump.
Fair enough. Now, I was speaking to Pepe, and he emphasized how huge it was that President Putin had gone to a meeting to meet the foreign minister of Iran, Araghchi. And he said the significance of that is quite large. And for a president to meet a foreign minister is also quite unusual. What's your kind of thoughts on how that, in terms of Putin making that effort to have that meeting?
I don't see it as significant, to be honest. I mean, Putin's also met Steve Witkoff, who's just a real estate developer. So I think the important thing is that when there are big international disputes, I mean, Putin is willing to, meet people, parties involved in those kind of conflicts and have dialogue with them. Most of the work obviously will be done via Sergei Lavrov. But I just think it's part of Russian statecraft that actually they're open, the doors are open for dialogue, and Putin will meet visitors even if the main legwork is done by his foreign minister Lavrov. So I don't really see it as that significant. I mean, I think the interesting thing there is you don't see that in terms of Western capitals. How often do you see kind of Western heads of government meeting sort of foreign ministers? Very rarely happens. All these things are normally subordinated to the kind of more junior people. In that regard, Putin is different in having a much more open door policy. That's just their style. It works for them, but I don't see it as particularly exceptional.
Keir Starmer has been adamant that he doesn't want to be part of this war, and yet we've seen a lot of engagement by the United Kingdom. We've seen, obviously, Diego Garcia being used, but not just that. We've seen a number of British, a lot of movement of British assets, and allegedly there are British assets now in the UAE attempting to defend the UAE. What's your thoughts on the UK and their involvement in this war?
Well, we're not really a part, and we shouldn't be a party to this war. But unfortunately, Trump is trying to drag us ever more sort of closely into this, and we've seen this fight from the start, from the initial refusal to allow the US to use, our bases in Diego Garcia and I.O. Fairford as well, in the United Kingdom, and then Keir Starmer doing a complete U-turn on that when he came under pressure to kind of send naval assets, and the kind of really poor response to that, it taking HMS Dragon about 3 weeks to get to Cyprus, and that needing repairs twice along the way because we just have hardly any ships in our kind of Royal Navy. We've been in a slightly embarrassing way trying to kind of make Trump happy when, frankly, we don't have any real military capabilities to bring to bear. And in any case, it's not really our fight. So yet again, Starmer has found himself trying to pander to Trump because he sees that relationship as important and looking weak in the process.
What about the UK's kind of engagement in this Russia-Ukraine war? You know how bad it is in the UK. I mean, we're struggling significantly. The working class aren't in a great situation. People need a lot of help and support. What's the UK's perspective in this Russia-Ukraine war? It seems like, obviously, I know their perspective. What I mean is their kind of willingness to engage in a more additional mode or method.
Well, there hasn't been any willingness. And there hasn't been any willingness since 2014 when Philip Hammond became the Foreign Secretary. This isn't just a Labour Party issue. It's not really just a Keir Starmer issue. It's a UK issue. The fact that we've invested in this idea that we should support Ukraine come what may, we should cut off all diplomatic dialogue with Russia, we should pursue economic sanctions even as evidence mounts that sanctions hurt us more than they hurt Russia. And we believe in this bizarre concept of inflicting a strategic victory on a country with the biggest nuclear arsenal in the world, with the biggest territory in the world, rich in natural resources, which is Russia. And that is a position that hasn't changed. Keir Starmer came in as somebody who really wasn't that interested in foreign policy issues more than domestic policy issues. He's tried to pivot to show himself as some statesman on the world stage. He's failed. UK policy hasn't changed. Ukraine is bankrupt and increasingly a broken state. And we have no answers to that apart from to keep giving them money to keep fighting on when they can't win.
And I guess that's my question. Why is it the UK has continued to provide money? Is it just their kind of loyalty to this whole Ukraine situation? Because we're not benefiting, Ukraine's not benefiting, Europe's not benefiting. All of them are becoming weakened because of it. What's the kind of... It's not... And what I mean by that is it's obviously a decision-making of the previous government, and yet this government is continuing on with that and actually being a lot more supportive, especially when you look at a lot of Keir Starmer statements.
Part of it is herd mentality. We're just following the herd like a bunch of lemmings, unable to kind of course correct as the cliff edge gets ever closer and we get closer to kind of running off the edge of it. Part of it is that we're bang out of ideas. Part of it is an underlying latent Russophobia. Part of it is the fact that the whole executive branch, the mainstream media in the United Kingdom is completely captured by this idea that Russia's bad, we're good, and we just need to kind of fight them to the end. And we will defeat them, and maybe one day we'll go to war to them too, even though our army is at its smallest state since it was in 1823, 200 years ago. So it's partly delusion as well. But in none of this do you see any calm-headed consideration of actually, the benefits to Ukraine itself by the war ending and it allowing itself to kind of be reconstructed, benefits to the UK in terms of the massive cost of living crisis, which is affecting working class people on a day-to-day basis, on which, the citizens of this country have voted today in quite a resounding way to reject, Keir Starmer's limp and bland and dull and uninspiring sort of government, of this country. And, I saw so many Labour talking heads today talking about the kind of leadership Keir Starmer is providing on the world stage. Well, he's not providing any leadership on the world stage, first thing. But secondly, that's not what British people care about. British people care about their kids feeling safe and happy, having jobs, seeing their incomes growing, having the potholes fixed, having people with zombie knives not being able to stab innocent kids in the streets, and all of those things. Nobody cares about Keir Starmer's preening attempts to be some sort of global statesman, which he isn't. They want the government to fix their problems, and he hasn't done that.
No doubt, no doubt. I don't think he's even respected on the world stage or by people throughout the world. Now, in terms of one last question about the UK, and we'll get back into the war. And in terms of the UK, we are or were hearing reports that there could be a possibility of a forced conscription at some point. Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think that's a very, very minimal in terms of if the UK was to engage in some kind of kinetic war and join the Russia-Ukraine war?
Well, my question to that is well, why can't we pursue diplomacy? We haven't tried it for 12 years since the Ukraine crisis started. Let's try it now. So before we even contemplate going to war with Russia, which is a completely ridiculous idea, by the way, our army is tiny. We could barely send one Type 45 destroyer to, Cyprus without it having to be fixed several times along the way. Let's get real about this. Having a big war against Russia serves nobody's interests and will end up getting us all killed. Well, instead of just going straight to the point of nuclear immolation, why don't we think about trying diplomacy again? We're well out of practice in the UK. Maybe now's the time to restart that.
Yeah. Now, and I totally agree with you. And remember, it was Boris Johnson who kind of destroyed all peace efforts previously.
It was. Yeah, like I said, it's not a Labour Party. It's not a Conservative Party. It's not even the Lib Dems, because they're as warmongering as the Tories and the Labour. This uniparty, which has a stranglehold over our foreign policy these days, it's all of them. They are all trapped by this kind of delusion.
And it's all parties. Even the alternative parties are so supportive of war that we really don't have an option in the UK at all when it comes to political choice. But coming back to the Iran war, we've seen kind of diplomacy not work. Now we've seen in the Strait of Hormuz major escalation. Where do you see this going? Because you're seeing, for example, today we saw the United States of America strike an Iranian vessel, 2 vessels, killing 5 innocent civilians. I mean, and then Iran just came out and said they hit a US destroyer. How far does this go?
Well, America's gamble is that Iran is going to run out of oil, wealth, and will have to kind of come to its knees and, agree to some sort of diplomatic settlement on terms that aren't favorable to Iran. Well, there's no evidence that that is the case. I mean, Iran still has some reserves. It can probably still keep fighting, even if the US manages to choke off all of Iran's oil exports over the next kind of few weeks. Iran can probably keep going for another few months with declining income from that kind of US blockade. So that's one thing. I mean, if that happens, what happens to the world economy if the Americans keep firing oil tankers, killing innocent civilians on board those oil tankers? Well, apart from the fact that it'll radicalize world, opinion against the United States, itself, including in the developing world, but also actually in parts of the Western world too, including here, in the United Kingdom, the global economy will go even into an even deeper meltdown than it's already headed for, as Trump believes that he can somehow economically bring Iran to its knees by choking off its kind of oil income in circumstances where Iran has been sanctioned since 1979 and sanctions have had no impact at all. So again, it's completely delusional, and just give it a rest. He's gone in. He had no strategy. He has got insufficient troops, to invade, and actually Iran is a country the size of Western Europe, and the whole idea is bizarre when you think about what happened in the US intervention in Iraq from 2003 onwards. He's failed. He's failing. The world economy is sinking further and further into a big depression ahead. Let's not make it any worse. Let's just finish it now and just, whatever he wants to do is try and polish this failure as a success to his people. Well, have at it on Truth Social with all the posts that you want to kind of issue. But let's be serious and let's get into diplomacy and bring this silly war to an end.
I guess the question is, does he really want the war to end? And what I mean by that is, when we spoke at the start of this interview, I mentioned 3 or 4 major incidences which resulted in major wealth transfer from the working class to the oligarchs or corporations. And if you look at what's happening in this war, he's got a blockade on. Poor countries are struggling significantly. And then Europe is really having huge problems. American allies are having major problems, and that includes Europe. But Trump himself is benefiting financially. You look at many of the trades that are being put in, it seems like he's enriching himself quite a bit. And so does he really want this to end? Because if the goal is to kind of create this wealth transfer, if the goal is to, basically benefit the corporations, then the blockade's brilliant, right?
Well, it is, and it was forever thus, right? I mean, wars don't benefit ordinary working class people. If you walk into your local town or village or city, wherever in the United Kingdom or in any country, you'll find people who they don't really care about what's happening on the world stage. They care about what's happening in their local communities. They care about the quality of the public services they're receiving. They want their kids to feel safe and happy. They want opportunities to get work and an income and have food to put on the table every day. These are the things that ordinary people care about. They don't want to be dragged off the streets and forced into a uniform because some very rich person has decided to fight a war in a far off country they've never heard of and have never really understood and been to. They just want to think about their day-to-day concerns, and that's what you're seeing in the election results, of course, today in the United Kingdom, which has seen a complete wipeout for the Labour Party right here. So yeah, we know that wars make the wealthy even more wealthy. We know that they just support the military-industrial complex and just feed the pockets of the fat cats that run those big corporations. We know all these things, and I think what we're starting to see across politics in the United Kingdom, in Europe as well, more broadly, in France, in Germany, in Central Europe, and so on, is ordinary voters saying, well, why don't we have governments that actually think about us first and forget about all these stupid wars and think about our needs? And I think that's a political transition we're starting to see across Britain and Europe right now, and I hope that continues.
No doubt. I think the people are realizing that. Well, my issue is this: the people are realizing that the governments aren't doing the right thing for them. But the problem is, just like in the past, they just think a changeover to the next one is just going to benefit without really understanding that are any of these groups or political parties really representative of your ideas and thoughts, and will it bring the country back to back to where it was or away from the problems that it's facing, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. But I also think social media has really kind of changed the nature of democracy as well. I think the speed with which information flows, the access to information in the alternative media space, including through your very good podcast, means that ordinary folk can have access to information that's outside of the bland and very managed and choreographed mainstream slop that you see on the BBC and other kind of mainstream channels. So I think actually because of that, political mobilization is rising. People have access to kind of better sources of information. They're curious. They have these questions, and they're finding information that they're throwing up answers in their minds and questions about their governments about why they're being failed on a day-to-day basis in foreign lands when our streets are full of potholes and kids are being murdered in the streets. So I think that's changing the nature of how democracy works in our country in real time and in countries across Europe. And I see that as only a good time. I mean, there has to be kind of wider implications for our political system as well, in terms of what we have these elections every 4 years. Is that too long? Because you've seen in the US, Trump came in promising to do all these things, promising to kind of help the blue collar workers, promising to reindustrialize America, promising to provide jobs, reduce reliance on Wall Street oligarchs and that sort of thing, promising to end forever wars. He's done none of those things. He's done completely the opposite, and actually he's given himself a 4-year term in office, uncontested. I mean, got the midterms coming up in November. So that is a separate problem in democracy that I hope we can figure out ways to sort out. But I think today's results is a positive sign for the health of our democracy, that actually people saying to Keir Starmer and other globalists will actually put our needs first.
Yeah, I guess, but the other problem with that is if you were to reduce the time period, that actually harms development. Like one of my actual issues that I have got with democracy is even the 4 years seem too short. So like a politician comes in, 4 years is not enough, and then he's already thinking about being re-elected again. He's not really putting in the real lasting changes. Like somewhere like Russia, the reason Putin was able to put in the lasting changes because he's been in charge for so long. The reason Xi and China has developed so much is because you've always had Xi. If Xi thought he was going to be replaced in 2-3 years, maybe you wouldn't have had the development. So shorter could be good, but I don't know. I think maybe longer might be better, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's true too. I mean, because there are two separate issues there, right? There's the actual politicians at, the top, the people are elected. Then there's a deep state. And that's a problem that we have, which I suppose you have less in Russia, places like Russia and China, where their whole kind of political settlement is on a totally different basis. So one of the problems we have in the UK is that the executive has too much power. All these kind of grey faces behind the scenes, can influence kind of what happens, and you need elected people to kind of hold them to account as well. So look, there are no easy solutions to this, except to say that our political settlement in the UK isn't working, is failing ordinary working class people. We're all getting poorer, we're getting less safe, we're being threatened with forced conscription for wars that we didn't sign up to. We need some sort of a change, and the Labour Party, the Conservative, the Lib Dems, all these mainstream parties don't seem to be the ones that do that. And just to be clear, I don't support any. I'm politically independent. I don't support any political party, so I'm not making a pitch for the Greens, Reform, or anybody else. I just want politicians who actually put the needs of, because believe it or not, even though I was a British diplomat, I'm a working class, from a very working class family. I want ordinary people's needs to be thought of first.
Where are you from?
Well, I'm actually from Southampton, but my dad's from the northeast of England, from Gateshead area. He grew up in a colliery village, and obviously all the pits were closed in the 1980s. You know about that during UK's own deindustrialisation. But yeah, my dad's a Geordie. My mum was, from the Southampton area.
Nice. I'm from Middlesbrough, so you're from the right place.
Well, Southampton are playing Middlesbrough tomorrow, so I'm hoping. Sorry, but I'm hoping that we beat you.
Well, I don't know. Up the borough. That's what we're going to say. Just coming back to it, just one last question before, because I know you need to head off. Just from your understanding of like negotiations, being a British diplomat, where do you think things go from now? Where do you think, what do we see in the next, I don't know, week or 2 weeks, or even in the distant future?
So there are two aspects to this. One is some sort of arrangement to bring the conflict to a close, with the main issues already having been agreed, like on economic relief for Iran, like on some assurances on future attacks, like on the other kind of allies in the axis of resistance, in the Middle East as well. Some assurances there. The Americans will want some sort of broad assurances on nuclear issues and so on and so forth. But I mean, there will have to be some sort of detailed agreement, which may take longer, because the negotiation of these texts can be quite a long, drawn-out process. So I think Iran will want, and I think the Americans will want, some sort of formulation, some sort of big agreement that maybe the Chinese and the Russians co-sponsor, like a JCPOA version 2 sort of thing. So I think the Iranians will want something in treaty language that is legally binding on the US and on, of course, Israel, that it's not going to be threatened, with attacks again in the future. That process will take a long time. If you're just sending in people like Witkoff and Kushner, they're not the people to do that work. Quite frankly, you need serious diplomats behind closed doors working on that over a period of time to get the deal that every side can agree with.
One last question. I know I was going to let you go, but how can you have a deal? Because this is the common problem we have. And I think this is something Iran needs to think about, is whenever you make a deal with Israel, they never abide by it. So we see now there's a deal in Gaza. There's a ceasefire in Gaza, but Gaza is being bombed almost every day. There was a ceasefire in Lebanon from 2024 to 2026. They continue to bomb. And even during this ceasefire, they continue to do so. So my problem is that if Iran was to agree to a deal with Lebanon included, that won't make a difference in the sense of it'll end up being a one-way deal, and then Israel will continue bombing Lebanon, and you're kind of in a situation where you've left them out in the cold.
Well, that's the difference between a ceasefire and an actual agreement, right? An agreement should be an all-encompassing thing that's legally binding. A ceasefire, anybody can breach it at any time. There's theoretically a ceasefire in Iran against Iran now, but actually they're still attacking ships in the Straits of Hormuz, and so on. So, I mean, ceasefires are necessarily quite fragile things because there are always incentives on both sides to break it, and they'll always claim, well, they did something, so we had to do something in return, and this sort of nonsense. An agreement is a treaty which is legally binding. It's easier to enforce that. And actually, in terms of the court of world public opinion, I think Israel has done a fantastic job in radicalizing world opinion against itself with its actions in Gaza, in Lebanon, and of course in terms of this ill thought through kind of war against Iran. I mean, they need to think about their positioning long term as well. I mean, they're not necessarily going to be a party to this agreement, but the Americans have a job in their hands to actually make sure the Israelis are going to stick to any deal that's agreed and not keep breaching it as they kind of pursue their own territorial ambitions.
No doubt. Ian, thank you so much for taking your time out to join us. Always appreciate it. Well, this is the first time I've heard it, so I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Where can people find you and find your work?
Well, I'm the Peacemonger. I'm at Ian Proud. I'm on YouTube. I'm just recently started a couple of months ago, and also on Substack at the Peacemonger. So I am the Peacemonger, not a warmonger. So clues in the name.
We love the peacemongers. We don't like the warmongers. So everybody make sure you follow Ian's Substack and follow his YouTube. Thank you so much for taking your time out to join us. Appreciate it.
Come on, you Saints.
Thank you. Up the borough. Thank you so much, Ian. Appreciate it. See you later. Thank you. That was Ian. Make sure you follow him on YouTube. Make sure you follow him on Substack. Like this video, comment in this video, subscribe to the channel, put your notifications on. Let me know your thoughts. What did you think about what he had to say? Do you agree with him in terms of his viewpoint about the United Kingdom? Do you disagree with him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, comment, and subscribe. Have your notifications on. Subscribe. Okay, I'm going to give you the news now because we've got Robert Pape coming on, but he's coming on in a little bit. So we're going to give you the news. Always good to give the news, give everybody an update on what's going down and break it down. So let me get into that. Okay, as you know, although we know this is kind of a way of misdirecting attention, redirecting attention away from the war in Iran, away from the Epstein files. Well, despite that being the case, there has been a release of the UFO files, and the UFO files have been released. And apparently, there's a lot of releases. And, for example, there's one showing 5 visuals of a Apollo 12 mission in 1969 showing 12 unidentified flying objects. So there is a lot of news about the UFOs. But coming back to it, let's get into actually the main part of the news, which is about Iran. And then we'll get into what the speakers have got to say. Okay. So first of all, we have a report that Iranian army hits on US Navy destroyer in the Hormuz. So obviously there were reports today that Iran had hit a US destroyer on the Strait of Hormuz. And the question became that, did this happen? Did they attack the US destroyer? I think that was confirmed. But did they manage to hit it? Well, NASA satellite data detected burning heat signatures drifting through the Strait of Hormuz on Friday morning, consistent with Iranian Army's claim that the US destroyer was hit. So it does seem like that there is a high possibility, a high probability that the Strait of Hormuz, the US destroyer on the Strait of Hormuz was hit. So that's the first, and then just to add to that, The Iranian army statement, they said the following. On Friday morning, while the US Navy was attempting to remove... Oh yeah, you guys said that the audio doesn't work as well. Let me just bring this closer, sorry. And I need to move it to the other side. I think that, let me just move it here so you guys can hear. So, on Friday morning, while the US Navy was attempting to remove 3 of its destroyers from the Strait of Hormuz towards the Sea of Oman with the air support, so the US Navy was attempting to remove 3 of its destroyers from the Strait of Hormuz towards the Sea of Oman with air support. We carried out a combined missile and drone operation, during which we targeted this naval group with 8 cruise missiles and 24 suicide drones. As a result of this operation, and despite the extensive attempts by the US Navy to repel the attacks, 1 cruise missile, being very specific actually, and 3 suicide drones successfully hit the American destroyer, causing fires to break out on them. It is worth noting that this operation was named Operation Martyr Mayavan in the memory of the commander of the Iranian destroyer Jamaran, Captain Amir Behzad Mayavan. So what that tells us is that Iran struck a US destroyer and basically put it on fire. They've said they hit the destroyer, and we have heat signatures from NASA confirming that at the time that they said that the US destroyer was hit, it was indeed on fire. We also have reports that prices of homes in the United States of America have escalated quite a lot. Obviously, it's becoming more and more difficult for Americans to buy and purchase homes. They're being priced out of the market by these corporations. Iran is breaking the US blockade through China. Since the US naval blockade began on April the 13th, Iran has tripled. You remember I mentioned this in the interview. Since the US naval blockade began on April the 13th, Iran has tripled its rail freight from China, with trains now running every 3 to 4 days. Containers are fully booked through May. Freight costs are up 40%, and still the orders are coming through. And so this freight that goes through, it goes through Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and then ends up in China. And actually, let me read some of these super chats. Wellness says, God bless all freedom fighters in pursuit of truth. Be free, keep an open mind, and of course, like, share, and subscribe. Get the truth out. There is no contagion. All of this is a transfer of wealth and an illusion. Be kind. Great point. And Philosophy says, ask if Keir Starmer should resign. I mean, I don't think so. No one wants Keir Starmer, but we know what the aim is. If he was to resign, they'd want Nigel Farage to cause more political unrest in the country, to cause more devastation in the country, to cause civil war in the country, so that they can bring a Palantir surveillance state into the United Kingdom. That's the aim. And this is going to be the aim in terms of when Nigel Farage is put in power. Philosophy says, are Iran's AI dolphin drones actually UFOs? It could be. It could be. They could be. They could be that indeed. Anything is possible. Let's put it that way. When it comes to the Americans and the claims that they make, the Americans and the Israelis. Okay. Pezeshkian made the following. He said, the quote, the policy of the Islamic Republic of Iran is to expand friendly relations based on mutual respect and shared interests. The policy of colonialism and exploitation will have no place in the future world. Just as tolerance is deeply rooted in the culture of our people, the struggle against oppression shines in the history of this land. This identity will continue for the exaltation of Iran's name. That was President Pezeshkian of Iran. Iran's foreign minister said Iran smashed, or as he said, slapped the US. He said, quote, Iran's defenders of the country struck them with a big slap and repelled their evil with all their might. Okay. 1 second. What's this? Iran's foreign minister made the following statement. He said, Iran never bows to pressure. He says, quote, every time a diplomatic solution is on the table, the US opts for a reckless military misadventure. Well, that's a misadventure. He said adventure. Is it a crude pressure tactic or the result of a spoiler once again duping POTUS into another quagmire? Whatever the cause, outcome is the same. Iran never bows to pressure. It was interesting, right? Because Trita Parsi was saying in the interview, he said that Saudi Arabia pushed for this war. They forced Trump into this war as well. They were desperate for it. And then they realized that, listen, no one cares about you. The United States of America doesn't care about you. Israel doesn't care about you. Trump made sure that they were defending Israel. They didn't defend you, and you got decimated and destroyed. And as he said quite accurately, the US military bases got decimated and destroyed. You did not defend your country. You did not defend yourself. You basically relied on the United States of America to protect you, and they weren't going to protect you. This is why I always say to these Gulf states, you're on the bottom of the foot of both the United States of America and Israel. And obviously, as you know, the United States of America is indeed controlled by Israel. There were reports that the UAE was attacked again about 7 or 8 hours ago. And there was, there was a Dubai International Airport. There was smoke plumes coming out from Dubai International Airport. You know what's interesting is that there's a complete military blackout of what's happening in Dubai, in UAE. Everyone's living in fear. They're scared to even post something, to send it to friends and family. There's a complete control over any information goes out there. This is a complete and utter police state where you have no rules, you have no freedoms, you have no reality of being able to do anything you want. The US sent an E-3B Sentry AWACS over the Persian Gulf near the UAE. Transponders were on. 2 KC-46 tankers flying from Tel Aviv to the Gulf through Saudi Arabian airspace. So a lot of movement of US military assets happening right now. 1 second. Just remember, I need to check something. Okay, cool. Let's continue. And by the way, guys, we got a lot of rave reviews about the debate yesterday between myself and Rabbi Shmuley. I think he never experienced such a destruction and devastation in his life. He was absolutely destroyed, dismantled. Check it out, because we exposed the lies about October the 7th. We exposed the lies about Israel in terms of what Israel does about Palestine, and what the lies that they've perpetuated against Iran. They had no answer. He had no solution. He had no thoughts. He had to run away from the debate. So check that out on the channel. It was a really, really good debate. But let me continue with the news. This is why they're afraid of me. Like, I don't like talking about myself too much, although I probably do. But this is why they're afraid of me. So As an example, Piers Morgan wanted me on his show. He wanted me on the show about Russell Brand. He wanted me on his show about there was a Hizb ut-Tahrir. Hizb ut-Tahrir is a branch of Al Muhajirun, which is a branch of Muslim Brotherhood. But these organizations don't like me because I'm against their ideas, right? I actually don't believe in extremist positions. And so what they did was he wanted me to come on his show to defend this Hizb ut-Tahrir guy for the comments they make. Now, I believe in free speech. Obviously, his speech shouldn't be taken away, but I don't want to be defending Hizb ut-Tahrir. So I said, look, I don't want to come on for that. The only reason I want to come on is solely and specifically about Palestine. I only want to talk about Palestine, and I want to speak about the lies and propaganda you've been perpetuating about October the 7th, and they never ever had me on. They'll put on people like, as I mentioned, many people who are pro-Palestine, but I'll always concede to all of Rabbi's position. They'll be like, no. You know, resistance is evil. October the 7th was evil. It was a massacre. They targeted innocent civilians. Everything was intentional. These guys are Islamists. These guys are extremists. And I'm like, nah, this ain't true. Let me debunk your lies. Let me debunk your claims. Let me destroy and devastate your position. So this is the reason why they never had me on. And this is why what you saw on a platform with Rabbi Shmuley, he had no answer. Because he's used to these other political commentators who immediately concede these points. People like, obviously I won't mention their names, but you know who I mean. These people who are put on these platforms for that specific reason, where they agree with the Israeli position. They agree with the Israeli position about October the 7th. They agree with the Israeli position about resistance. The only point of disagreement is, oh, yeah, you know, Netanyahu went too far. That's the only point of disagreement. We disagree with the entire premise. We disagree with the entire premise. We disagree with the entire basis. Everything they say is false. And this is why it was a very important debate with Rabbi Shmuley. So do share it with your friends and family and let everyone be educated about the truth about what happened in reality when it comes to October the 7th. Let me continue with the news. There's a lot of news about these UFOs, so it's crazy. Okay, there is an active shooter in Ohio right now as well. We just talk about that and just pass it on because it just happens so often. And I mentioned this. So I am going to get Richard Medest on. We're already talking about it. We're going to lock in a time. But him and a few others, they have this opinion that it's the US who are basically destroying a lot of these oil infrastructures in order to basically take control over the petro gas dollar, and so to have complete control over the various supply chains. Now, I don't agree with this position, but I am going to have him on to hear his view and hear his thoughts about that. But that being said, I would be very interested in what he has to say about what's happening in the US, because there's been a number of refineries that have been hit in the US, whether it's in Texas, whether it was in, I can't remember what the second one was, but this one here is in Louisiana. Charlemagne refinery in Louisiana with a major explosion. So if it's the US behind it, why are they hitting their own oil refineries? And 3, that's a huge number. Shiesty. Oh, this was Ohio. There's an active shooter in Ohio. I mentioned that Trump is bored of the war. Also, Trump has announced a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. And the ceasefire is thus, quote, this is what Trump had to say. I am pleased to announce that there will be a 3-day ceasefire, May 9th, May 10th, May 11th, in a war between Russia and Ukraine. The celebration in Russia is for Victory Day, but likewise in Ukraine because they were also a big part and factor of World War II. The ceasefire will include a suspension of all kinetic activity and also a prisoner swap of 1,000 prisoners from each country. This request was made directly by me, and I very much appreciate its agreement by President Vladimir Putin and President Volodymyr Zelensky. Hopefully, it is the beginning of the end of a very long and deadly and hard-fought war. Talks are continuing on ending this major conflict, the biggest since the World War II, and we are getting closer and closer every day. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Zohaib says, is there a video article I can watch and read of yours to better understand October the 7th? The mainstream media and all the research shows Hamas just entered and started slaughtering. Yeah, this is fake news. I can direct you towards, I am working on a book, although when this war started, I kind of stopped. Well, I stopped a bit before that because I was busy, but because the war, I've been writing a book on it, hopefully going to do a documentary on it. But if you look at my, a show I did on Fresh and Fit's channel, you can find it on Rumble. You type in October the 7th. For 5.5 hours, I traveled to the United States of America, to Florida. And for 5.5 hours, we broke down in detail what happened on October the 7th. Every single aspect of it was spoken about up until that point when information was relayed. So do check that out. That would be the best place to find that resource. Very good question. Appreciate you asking that. Very much on point and very important in terms of the work that we do. But yeah, sorry, I mentioned about the US oil refinery being hit. And so I don't think this is the US doing it, is the point I was making. But we'll get Richard Medhurst in. We'll try and get his views and thoughts about that. Someone said, I saw a couple of fools wearing medical masks in public yesterday, watching too much television. Well, this is going to be the question, right? Is this the new virus that they're going to now push? Is this going to be the new virus they're going to push? Well, I've got someone coming up. Well, we're going to try and get someone coming on to speak about it, just to understand what the drama is all about. But yeah, this is seems like it's for sure COVID 2.0. So far in the UK elections, this is the local elections. It's not a national election. By the way, the reports are saying the S&P 500 has closed at an all-time high. Reform UK has stormed ballot boxes, picking up 1,146 seats. Before this, they only had 2 seats. Starmer's Labour Party has suffered a humiliating defeat, losing over 1,000 seats. So these were just local government elections, but Labour being completely swept. There is no real party that you can actually choose that isn't Zionist controlled. Even Reform is completely Zionist controlled. All of them are Zionist controlled. Restore, Reform, Labour, Conservative, all of them are Zionist controlled. This is the problem we have. Okay. Continuing on with the news. I'm just giving the news because we've got Robert Pape coming on. Professor Robert Pape from the University of Chicago. He's huge now. He's very huge. He's very viral. He's been all over social media, all over the internet. And the reason is because of his position that he's been relaying about the escalation trap. And if you remember, there's been a number of people who've come on our space and show and asked or relayed his position. And so what's better than others relaying his position, but we get him on ourselves. So hopefully he should be coming on soon. So I'm just trying to bridge the gap up until he comes on and giving you guys the breaking news. Okay, and then apparently Israeli early warning systems detected a missile launch from Iran towards the Negev. But then they realized that the detection system had malfunctioned. I wouldn't be surprised if this is Iran hacking them once again. Okay. The US Special Ops mothership MV Ocean Trader just showed up at Diego Garcia right now as well. We also had... Okay, I mentioned what Possession already said. Are you guys ready for the hantavirus? Are you ready for the hantavirus? You know what? When we get back on the space after the Robert Pape interview, we need to ask Beatrix how many hantavirus jabs is she going to take? Is it going to be 6? Is it going to be 8? Is it going to be 10? Is it going to be innumerable? Hantavirus is coming. And Beatrix is going to make sure she's going to protect herself. She's going to protect herself from the hantavirus. I like this where we could just troll and they can't respond. Apparently, Moderna had a hantavirus vaccine in development before the outbreak. Their stock just jumped up 10% this week as a cruise ship hantavirus outbreak spread over the Atlantic. There's also, allegedly, I was reading, 3 cases in the United Kingdom as well. There's rumors that it's on Beatrix's street, but I don't know if that's true. That needs to be verified. The last bit needs to be verified, but the other bit has been verified. She seems to agree. Okay. Khamenei's advisor Mohammad Mukhbar said it clearly today. He said, quote, Iran will never abandon the Strait of Hormuz because its strategic capabilities there rival the atomic bomb. So he's saying it's as important in terms of a deterrent. Iran has said that the new Strait of Hormuz plan will become permanent law. So it is going to be controlled. It's going to be placed in legislation. That's already happened. Some legislations have gone through the Iranian parliament, but I guess the point is that more are going to do so. Okay, and then it says U.S. Navy F/A-18 fired precision munitions into the smokestack of 2 Iranian tankers today. Remember, they killed 5 people when they did that. A surgical shot. Well, this isn't surgical, but they killed 5 people, so I don't know how that is. Iran's foreign minister said it's a reckless adventure. Trump had the following to say about the UFO release. Quote, as for my promise to you, the Department of War has released the first tranche of the UFO UAP files to the public for their review and study. In an effort for complete and maximum transparency, it was my honor to direct my administration to identify and provide government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena, and unidentified flying objects. Whereas previous administrations have failed to be transparent on this subject, with these new documents and videos that people can decide for themselves what the hell is going on, have fun and enjoy. Well, listen, people don't care about the UFO files. What people want is the Epstein files. The Epstein files are files that Donald Trump promised. He promised he would release. He promised there would be transparency. And yet only 50% of them have been released. And 50% of them have yet to be released. And I would hazard a guess that the 50% that have not been released are much more consequential, expose a lot more people, and reveal the truth in a much more significant manner. And that's the real reason they weren't released. And what's interesting is I believe Marjorie Taylor Greene just came out recently and said what? She said those files have not, that basically when they were trying to release the files, Trump got on the phone with her and said, do not release those files because it will implicate my friends. So Trump doesn't want the files released. He claims to Marjorie Taylor Greene that's going to implicate his friends. Whatever it may be, those files need to be released. And more so than now, are those files the reason why there is a war with Iran? Are those the files the reason why there's a direct attack on the American Constitution, on the First Amendment? Are those files the reason why Trump is escalating and American lives are being sacrificed? We need to know this. We need transparency. We need the release of those files, but they are not being released. Remember, what was interesting about the virus was not this hantavirus, but if you remember the COVID vaccine, RFK let it slip that the virus was it basically impacted people differently based on genetics, which makes it seem or suggest like it was engineered in order to impact various people based on their ethnicity and race. And the group allegedly, that, well, not allegedly, this is according to what's his name again, RFK, the group that it impacted the least was whom? Ashkenazi Jewish people. Now, is that a coincidence or no? We don't know, but we know that we know that the COVID impacted them the least. Okay. There was also a major oil spill. Well, not major, but there was an oil spill near Carg Island as well. So that's interesting if it was a natural one or this was because of the US bombing. Iran's foreign minister said the following. He says it supports a ceasefire and has forces at maximum military readiness. He says, quote, Tehran is watching every development closely. The pause is conditional. The military is not standing down. Highest levels of readiness is not the language of a country that expects this to hold. So it means that Al Jazeera is saying that they don't expect, or Iran doesn't expect this blockade to continue. And just to give you an update, the hantavirus outbreak on the cruise ship Hondius has killed 3 passengers with 5 more suspected cases on board. The strain is Andes virus originating from Chile and Argentina, and it's the only hantavirus variant confirmed to spread human to human through close contact. Every other hantavirus strain requires direct contact with infected rodents. This one doesn't. The ship left South America in late March and is now near Cape Verde, trying to dock in the Canary Islands to repatriate passengers. A sealed and crowded ship with a virus that jumps from between people to people is what the claim is about the hantavirus. That's crazy. It's these people, man. They're always at one extreme after another. A Lebanese citizen, what's this? So this is Fawad Makhzoumi, an MP in Lebanon. He says, I would first like to reaffirm my full support for President General Joseph Aoun in the path he is leading to protect Lebanon, restore the full role of the state, and guide the country towards a just and lasting peace that preserves its sovereignty and serves the interests of its people. You know what's interesting is they say that, but yeah, they had the ability to defend their country. And for a year and a half, almost 2 years, when Hezbollah told the Lebanese government to defend its people, what did they do? They did nothing. Israel continued to bomb every single day. They killed innocent civilians almost every single day. They also occupied South Lebanon. There was 5 different locations, 5 different areas. You'll see the Substack I wrote and the video I did that demonstrate that there was 5 different areas that were that were occupied by Israel of South Lebanon. So where is the Lebanese government? What is the chat saying? Are they saying Beatrix spread the hantavirus? Is that the virus she had? So she needs to be quarantined. Bro, please quarantine her. Save us. I'm down with that. We need to do the Chinese method on her. You know when the Chinese basically lock people in and won't let them out? Okay, continue with the news. We should have Robert Pape coming on soon. So just bridging the gap and giving you the news until Robert Pape comes on. And then after that, we'll be moving to the other show. Let me just quickly see the stream is working. Yeah. Oh, 1 second. Oh, I didn't do this. 1 second. Cool. One second, I'm just gonna quickly. I realized I forgot to go live on TikTok, but I'm gonna do it for the interview with Professor Pape. Cool. Okay, back. Let me just continue to give you the news. So Rubio says this. He thinks people are stupid, but he says the reason why Lebanon faces bombing is because of Hezbollah. Hezbollah is imposing this on them. That is ridiculous, right? Israel has bombed village after village after village. They bombed South Lebanon. They bombed Beirut. They've bombed every single area. They've bombed Christian churches. This guy doesn't care because he's a foreign asset for Israel. They've bombed a Christian church. They've bombed a nun's monastery in Yarun. They bombed a Christian school. They bombed a large number of Muslim areas. They bombed a large number of Sunni and Shia areas. Nothing has been stopped by these people when it comes to the attacking or bombing of people. It's been significant. It's been ferocious. It's been unstoppable in terms of the bombing they've been doing from the air. How can you blame Hezbollah for it? This was happening during the 16 months. I already mentioned this. When there was a ceasefire with Hezbollah, why was that? Why was Israel continue to bomb then? Why would they continue to occupy then? Do they think we're stupid? Israel tried to invade Lebanon before there was Hezbollah. Israel tried to tried to invade Lebanon before there was Hezbollah. They've always attacked Lebanon, even before the existence of Hezbollah. This is completely ridiculous. It makes no sense whatsoever. It only works on the people who are ignorant and are manipulated and aren't aware of the truth. Rubio said, we should get Iran's response today. I hope it's a serious offer. I really do. Tucker Carlson says, the greatest leader I've ever met is MBZ of Abu Dhabi. Absolutely ridiculous. What world is he living in? Complete stupidity. MBZ, how is he a good leader? The guy has perpetuated all of the crimes that Tucker Carlson talks about in Israel. MBZ has partaken in the same crimes. So what is and how is this claim? And even if you talk about the UAE, then just like Israel requires the United States of America to defend it, well, the UAE is the same. So if Tucker is against Israel, I can't see how he's not against the UAE. Both countries are exactly the same. So, I mean, a lot of question marks there. Let's put it that way. We have footage of Iranian naval forces seizing the Barbados flag tanker Ocean Koi in the Sea of Oman. And they've intercepted it. They don't need to destroy it. They don't need to kill people. This was the best one. Wait, where's this statement? Okay. Basically, Arachi said every time a diplomatic, I mentioned this already, but then not the rest of it, so I'll read the rest of it. Every time a diplomatic solution is on the table, the US opts for a reckless military adventure. It is a crude pressure tactic or the result of a spoiler once again dumping POTUS into another quagmire. Whatever the causes, outcome is the same. Iran never bows to pressure. And diplomacy is always the victim. He says, also, the CIA is wrong. Our missile inventory and launcher capacity are not at 75% compared to February the 28th. The correct figure is 120%. And as for our readiness to defend our people, it's 1000%. So he's saying their missile capability since February the 28th is at 120%. That means they've got the same number of missiles they had before, and then they've produced even more so. So they've produced the ones they fired, they've produced them and another 20% more during this break of hostilities. Iran has got a large number of missiles. There's no doubt about that. If you remember and watched my video before the war, I demonstrated that Iran has probably more than 20,000 missiles. They have those number of missiles. This is confirmed. What the issue that Iran had is, which we can say now because, you know, the ceasefires are passed, but according to my sources within Iran, the issue was that the underground, what's it called again? The underground assets they had, the underground cities they had, the missiles were held there. So they had no issue with missiles. But what happens is for some of the older missiles, because they have new missiles, they have old missiles, they have missiles from a while ago. This is why they've been ready for this war for a very, very long time. And they've been sending a lot of their older missiles in this war with some newer missiles, if you've listened to my analysis on this. But what happens with older missiles is you need to recondition them. And so they were having a few bottlenecks. The first one was the reconditioning of the missiles, and the second thing was getting fuel down into these underground cities. Those were two of the bottlenecks that they were having during this war. So the ceasefire has allowed them to basically solve those issues. Now they're ready. They've got the missiles. They've got the drones. They've got the targets. They're ready. They're ready for war. They don't want war. They want peace. But they want peace in the entire region. But if it's war it must be, then war it shall be. And this is the problem that the United States of America have. They can do more of the same. They have 8 of their hypersonic missiles. What's 8? You can cause devastation in 8 areas. First of all, untested. If you remember our interview with Larry Johnson, they said they were very sporadic in their testing. Like some of them would work and others would not work. But they've only got 8. This is not going to be good for the US empire. Not good at all. Tanner Welsh with a funny one, but yeah. I guess Tucker Carlson likes that though. So, John Mersheimer said the following, that there are 3 options. 1, keep the blockade and sanctions, slow pressure, but Iran doesn't break easily and the Strait remains contested. 2, escalate with heavier strikes, risks a wider regional war, and still doesn't guarantee control of the Strait. 3, negotiate a deal, achievable, but politically it looks like a capitulation after weeks of strikes. And that's the thing. The deal now is going to be a lot worse than the deal on February the 27th. If you remember, on February the 27th, before they started this war, it was quite clear Iran was willing to cede a lot. Iran was willing to concede quite a lot in order to make sure that this doesn't go to war. Trump could have had the nuclear enrichment he wanted. 0% actually, much better than even what the Iranian wanted. They were willing to stop completely nuclear enrichment. They were willing to do all of the deal because they didn't want war. Now, as Trita mentioned, you're talking about sanctions relief. Iran has control of the Strait of Hormuz. They're discussing the percentages. They're discussing the time frame by which they can stop enriching. This entire operation by the United States of America has been a complete and utter failure. Actually, this interview with Robert Pape is going to be interesting because he has quite a radical opinion. He believes there's going to be a ground invasion. He believes that there's going to be a real ground invasion. So that's going to be an interesting interview. Let me get his bio up as well so I can read it. So that's going to be interesting because he actually does think that there's going to be there's going to be a major escalation. Okay. Okay, he'll be coming on soon. So guys, make sure you retweet the space, reshare the space, let everybody know we're live. In addition to that, if you can do me another favor, if you can go to the 2 tweets in the nest. One is the YouTube and the other one is the X Live. And if you can retweet them, that would be brilliant. Okay, we've got a bit more news. Let me just quickly give you this. Multiple shots fired at Summit Hall in Lockland, Ohio. Heavy police presence. This is about a shooter, an active shooter. Trump said, sorry, not Trump, President Putin responded to Trump's statement, and the Kremlin said this quote: Russia does not require anyone's permission to hold the Victory Day parade in Moscow. The S&P 500 just closed at an all-time record high. And the claim is this. Obviously, they bring these claims out on Friday when the market's about to close in order. These are the key points within the deal. Let me just quickly give you that. It's crashed, I think, a little bit. Okay, sorted. Iran eases Strait of Hormuz pressure. US pauses the blockade. Possible nuclear stockpile moves. And even sanctions relief is on the table. They're saying that talks in Pakistan could happen as soon as next week. It's going to be good. We're going to have Robert Pape on. That is going to be a very, very good interview. Let me just make sure he hasn't dropped out. Got 10 minutes to go before he comes. Well, less than that now. Okay, cool. It's going to be golden interview. Let me just quickly... Oh, guys, by the way, just so you know, yesterday, you may have not missed it. He's coming in about 5 or 10 minutes, Jin. It's going to be... it's going to be... so I was going to say... So yesterday, we had a great debate with Rabbi Shmuley. We debunked a lot of his claims, destroyed a lot of his propaganda. So check that out. That was a good interview. No one's destroyed Shmuley like he was destroyed yesterday. No one's exposed the lies about October the 7th like they were exposed yesterday. So check that out. Like this YouTube channel as well. Subscribe to it. Put your notifications on. Support the channel and let your friends and family know about it. That would be awesome. Now we got Professor Pape coming on any second now. It's going to be golden. And let's see. 1 second. Let me just give you some of his bio as well, so you're ready for it. Here we go. So Professor Pape is an American political scientist who studies the national and international security affairs with a focus on air power, political violence, social media propaganda, and terrorism. He's a professor of political science at the University of Chicago and a founder and director of the Chicago Project on Security and Threats. If I remember right, because I remember seeing him say this, but I'm sure he's an advisor to the Pentagon as well, or he has been. So yeah, he briefed the National Security Council, and he's been doing that for many, many years. And this is kind of his job, where he explains what different engagements and different escalations and what it can result in. So that's going to be really good. We're going to have him on in a few minutes. Let me actually have this tweet ready so I can tweet it out that he's coming. Could you ask Robert Pape about the amount of 20% and 60% enriched uranium and how long it would take Iran if they could enrich it further? Thanks. Sure. So you want me to ask like how long it would take to enrich uranium from 60% to 95%? Sure, I can ask him that. It's I mean the answer is a few weeks, but I will ask him for you. From 60%, it doesn't take long at all. So I'm just putting Professor Robert Pape joins the show. When you see me looking down, it's because I'm tweeting out. I don't have a team, guys. I'm just a one-man show in terms of this tweeting stuff. This bit here, promoting this bit. Join now. Okay. Okay. So we should be having him on. I've got the tweet ready. So select all. Oh yeah, great idea. Yeah, I forgot to do it before. Let's change it now, actually, while we're setting up for Professor Pape to come. Sweet, it fitted as well. Okay, that's gonna be good. So yeah, there's 2 tweets in the nest. Retweet them, reshare them, especially the video. It's because based on those things that people are more open to coming on our show for. Okay. Let me see if there's any more news. Okay, what time is it? Okay, yeah, he'll be coming on in the next few minutes, so it should be good. We'll be getting him on in a few minutes. So that's going to be fine. Excited about it. So, yeah, it's going to be a really good interview. Let's see what he's got to say. Professor Pape, escalation trap. Everyone you hear talking about escalation trap, they got it from Professor Pape. So it's going to be really, really good. Okay, so we got Professor Pape coming on. It's going to be really, really good. In the meantime, guys, like I said, like this channel, subscribe to it, like, comment, and subscribe. Comment in the main section and try and get as many people in here as possible. The more people we can get on, we get great interviews. We've got great conversations on here. Make sure we're getting as many people on this show as possible. Actually, let me just check if I've got this on. Okay, so I thought that was Robert Pape. Okay, we will be starting soon. Oh my God, these regulars and they don't even know where we are. We on. Okay, cool. So guys, we'll be getting luckily the YouTube people can't hear, so you're already been quarantined. You've already been quarantined away from the people. The hantavirus isn't going to spread. Beatrix is rumor has it she already taken 5 jabs, so she's been quarantined. We got to quarantine her away from the people. Okay. Guys, retweet, reshare. Like I said, subscribe to this channel. We've got a great lineup already setting up for tomorrow. Guess what? On Tuesday, we've got David Icke. I forgot to mention that, right? We've got David Icke on Tuesday, 11 a.m. That's going to be golden. He's popular. He's well known. Everyone likes him. David Icke, 11 a.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. UK. David Icke. That is going to be a fire interview, to say the least. Why do you guys keep calling it the Shmuley interview? It wasn't an interview. It was a debate. And he got demolished. He got devastated. and destroyed. Okay, Robert Pape should be coming on any minute now. This is going to be a great interview, great information. Your boy's a bit tired. Should have had some water actually. But anyway, your boy's a bit tired, but we're ready to go. We're ready to interview Robert Pape. Hopefully he turns up. Hopefully it's not a no-show. That'd be bad. But I did send him the link. Okay, cool. Should be good. What do you say? Someone said it was not a debate, it was a murder. Yeah, it was a massacre. We absolutely destroyed him. Yeah, he was destroyed. Shmuli was destroyed. We're just waiting for Professor Pape. He should be coming on any minute now. He's not told me he's cancelling, so it should be really good. Great interview. We're going to be talking about the escalation trap. He says there's 4 stages to it. I have got some question marks about these escalation traps, so I'm going to ask him those questions. I'll let him lay it out first. And then there's a few questions about this escalation trap and maybe some questions on how that would work. So that should be great. I'm just waiting for him to come on. Should be coming on any minute now. Hopefully. It is 10 o'clock now, so that is 4 p.m. Chicago time, right? Let me see what time it is in Chicago. Time in Chicago. Yeah. So it is 4 o'clock. That's what time I agreed with him for. 4 p.m. Chicago time. Let me just message. Just messaging him. Okay. Cool. We're just waiting for Professor Pape. He should be joining. Well, he was meant to join a minute ago, but obviously might be a minute or two behind, hopefully. But in the meantime, let me give you... see if there's any more updates while we're waiting for the professor to join. Right, this is being reported by Channel 12 of Israel. And they're saying that Israel sent a message to Washington, D.C., saying that any resumption of fighting must include the destruction of Iran's energy infrastructure. And they claim Iran's energy infrastructure could be destroyed within 24 hours, and destroying it would force Tehran into negotiations. Israel is trying to convey to Washington that targeting Iran's energy infrastructure is the only way to make progress. First of all, that's foolish. That would not take 24 hours to destroy all of Iran's energy infrastructure. It would take a significantly longer time to do so. And in that time, Iran can target the energy infrastructure of the Gulf states and make them and deem them unoperational. They will be completely decimated. They will be completely destroyed. Their countries will cease to exist. Somewhere like the UAE, if their countries are hit, they will cease to exist. So that's an example of why that makes no sense. Thank you to Remil, is it Remel? Was it Remy Ledger 18 for the level 1 membership. Appreciate you and appreciate you becoming an important member of the community. Oh, you're talking about the mic? Yeah, that's a short one. Okay. So thank you for that. We're just waiting for Professor Pape to join. I mean, look, I've never had him on before, so he could be a no-show, but hopefully he's not. He seemed quite professional, but you never know. Okay, let me just give you some more news while we're waiting. I don't know how much. We'll wait a few more minutes for him and see if he's turning up or not. It's kind of annoying. So the UK elections, we had 1,416 seats go to Reform, 922 seats go to Labour, 740 seats go to the Tories, Conservatives that is, 734 seats go to the Liberal Democrats, and 468 seats go to the Greens, and 154 seats go to the Independents. And as I said, there is renewed clashes between Iran and the United States of America in the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, so I know what to do. Like, I'll wait another few more minutes and then let's see if he turns up. If not, then we'll wrap it up. Okay, let me just give you some more news and then we'll take it from there. If not, then I'll wrap up and then we'll go back to the space. We'll give him another 2-3 more minutes. Let me just quickly give you some more of the news. Okay. Okay, and then we have some more news. Let me just quickly find some more news for you. Actually, there's not much news. Okay, so guys, make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Make sure you have your notifications on check the interview or check the debate with Rabbi Shmuley. I think that was a really, really good debate. We should still have Professor Pape on. I am going to wait a couple of more minutes for him. If he doesn't turn up, obviously, then it is what it is. But yeah, let's see what goes on. And then we'll go to the space. I know there's one. We'll see what the speakers on the space have got to say. Well, who's this? Someone said he kept acting like he loved Muslims, but was quick to change his stance ASAP and label basically everyone an Islamist. What a clown. Well, that and also the manipulation. Like, these people think we're stupid when they're like, oh yeah, 90% of Muslims are good, but 10% are bad. But 10%, that's 130 million Muslims. It's like, that's crazy. Like, you're basically saying 130 million people are a danger to you. Like, do you think we're stupid that we're going to be like, yeah, that's so true, thanks for being so nice, and 90% are fine? Like, it is ridiculous. I was like, first of all, you just made that up. That came from the figment of your imagination, from these NGO groups that are funded by Zionists. But actually, there's most of your society that supports the extremists that support the genocide in Gaza. It's like 80 to 90% of people said that Israel hadn't gone far enough of Israeli Jews. So this whole claim that you make is false. This whole claim you make makes no sense whatsoever. And yeah, he was destroyed for it, for sure. What else we got? Let me just read some of your chats. You gassed him with facts. Yeah, I destroyed it. Oh, right. I get what you're saying that. Disavow. Shmuley is the type of guy who would say he debated God and won. Yeah, he'd be literally at heaven being like, if you don't let me into heaven, you are an anti-Semite. You are an anti-Semite if you do not let me into heaven. Oy vey, goy vey, indeed. That's what this guy would say. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. I don't think he's coming. So, guys, if you're on the YouTube, we're going to be ending the show. So let me just do that here. And what we're going to do is we're going to be going on to the other channel. We're going to be moving on to the X space. So everyone do come across to the other channel. And we are going to move on to the X space. I mean, it's tight that you didn't turn up. Like, we had an agreement and everything, but it is what it is. Schedule people and then I'll turn up. Unless people got to them. This is why I shouldn't probably advertised it as well, because this is what happens. So let's okay, yeah, cool. So guys, can you put it in the comments? Let me put it in myself, and then we'll move on to the space. And then we'll go to the space and see what people are going to say. Sorry, guys. Just trying to do all this while I'm doing the space. And then we'll... Oh, sweet. So that posted it. Okay. So where Siddhat has posted it, if you can go there, that would be awesome. We're going to move across there. Appreciate you guys coming in. We've got so many great interviews lined up. I'll put it out in terms of who the interviews are tomorrow. That being said, much love to each and every single one of you. We'll see you guys on the other YouTube. We'll continue on with the X, but with the YouTube. Like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribe. Okay, I'm ending this.